What was JP like before and after the convo? Oh, that's such a good comparison. God, that was such a great...
Isn't it more likely that people are either misinformed or misguided than people are legitimately trying to depopulate the planet?
This is such a good line of questioning. This is what I went into this debate wanting to see. Is it like, if I would have quoted this old speech back to him, it would have been so interesting to see his take on it now. Oh, it was this. Okay, yes.
This used to be vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No.
When you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution.
That was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all, actually.
What do you mean redistribution wasn't an issue? What the hell do you think they did to the kulak?
God! Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting sucked back into this. This debate was 2 months ago. I want to be polite because I enjoyed the conversation. But God, his political understanding is unbelievable. Like, what was the problem with the Soviet Union and communism? And he says redistribution because taxes are too high. Redistribution. It's like the conservative critique. It's like somebody took conservatives under Reagan, calling Democrats communists their whole lives, and then pretended that the democratic communism that exists in the United States was the same as the communism of the Soviet Union. Wait, what the Deepak, thanks for the 700 viewer host. Oh my God, sorry. Oh God, I'm getting sucked back into remembering these unbelievable arguments. The central problem for people that care, the central problem with like socialism and shit isn't redistribution or taxes. Taxes have nothing to do with socialism. The problem with socialism are like planned or command economies. That's the issue. It's not redistribution. Isn't the problem that the redistribution is at gunpoint? No, it has nothing to do with redistribution. There is no redistributing in like socialism. Well, I mean, there kind of is, but it's not, that's not, when we think of redistribution in the West, we're thinking of taxing people and then giving that money back in the form of like government subsidies or government welfare, right? When you're talking about more socialized or communistic systems or whatever, you're talking about changing the inputs and the outputs of your economy. And you're talking about having these directed by a central government or bureau. And in an idealized form, you're talking about a ownership of the actual capital itself by the workers. None of this is redistribution. Like in a very abstract form, you can call it redistribution, but chances are if you call it redistribution, it's because you don't understand any of the models at play. You don't understand the capitalistic model or the socialist model. Can you give a concrete example of how the command economy falls short? Well, yeah, every country that's tried. If your inputs and outputs are being determined by like a central body trying to figure out who needs what, you're just way less ability. You have less of an ability to be responsive to changing conditions on the ground, basically. As people want different things, as money shifts around, as opportunities become available for whatever, there could be a variety of ways that this functions. Government policy can lag behind what a market would solve in a very quick, real-time manner. By the way, I'm not saying markets are perfect. I'm not going to hedge that, though. If you think I'm saying that, drink bleach.
You're welcome to join us. And
I think Destiny's just using a different definition. Wait, hold on. Am I getting triggered? Wait. Destiny, you need to understand he's talking about the redistribution of food if you're talking about the Soviet Union. No, I don't think he is, but we'll get there. Could you call Amazon a form of planned economy? No. Destiny presumes that the government has the people's best interest in mind. No. Oh, Wolfie. What a hilariously, naively retarded way to view other people or to view the world. The government doesn't have the people's best interest. The government is composed of a bunch of people, or comprised of a bunch of people that want to win elections. Now, typically you do this by adhering to what people want, but you could also find ways to do it that doesn't adhere to what people want. There are sneaky, weird things, but the same thing can be said for corporations as well. If you truly want to level up to the next level of being a thinking human being who's not a sheep that just follows whatever stupid online influencer you happen to watch the most of, okay? Understand this. Everybody has incentives. Very rarely are those incentives make the world a better place for everybody. That's true of corporations. That's true of the government, okay? Everybody has incentives. They respond to them predictably. You just try to follow where the incentives go, and then you try to construct a system where the incentives hopefully point you in the right direction, okay? That's what Adam Smith was talking about when he talked about the invisible jerk-off, okay? Is you have a hand that sneaks into your pants that you can't see, that nobody can see, and it jerks you off as long as you're sitting in the right position. And sitting in the right position means that you have all of the particular externalities accounted for with government policy. It means you've got all of the particular capital rules and all of the particular government restrictions set up so that when people are jerking you off, okay, they're not going to come everywhere, right? That's what it means.
I started early on. I was well, I guess back then you weren't a professional gamer yet because the game had just started to come out, but there was a game called StarCraft 2.
I need
And
to find a snappy way to put together my backstory. We should think about this for a second, because everybody always asks me this. How'd you get into streaming? Bro, I don't know. How'd you get into psychology? I just ordered a new shirt. It actually just came in the mail today. I don't know if I saw this on Twitter, but when I go to New York City, I'm doing like 3 shows now. I'm going to be on Ryan Long's show. I'm going to be on that Around the Table or whatever, and then I'm going to do something with Big Ak. I think I'm going to wear this shirt for every single appearance. It just got in the mail today. I love it. I love it. I might wear this shirt every place I go to. God damn, look at that American eagle with the flag over the goddamn Constitution. Hell the yes. I'm curious to what extent you would consider yourself pro-Israel as opposed to simply being against the narrative of Palestinian oppression, wherein the Palestinian side can do no wrong. I don't know, I'm probably like 65 or 70% pro-Israel. It just depends on where you're at. If I start talking to any, like that Simcha Rockman guy or whatever, if I start talking to any crazy pro-Zionist, I'm probably going to come off as super anti-Israel. For Peterson, you actually did really well for how respectful you're forced to be with all these big timers. Do you agree with JP's take on your temperament, like on relative agreeableness? I'm probably a person who's very low in agreeability. I think that's probably true as a temperament, yeah. I mean, I'm literally like a debater archetype, right? How would I be anything but low in agreeability? Or low in agreeability. You fit in well with almost any community and get along with anyone. I don't know how that fits into your agreeability. Agreeability, I think, just has to do with a temperament. I think it would be said in general that if you're very high in agreeability, it might be impossible for you to super disagree with somebody, to fight a lot on an opinion. But I think if you're very low in agreeability, you can probably just like chill, I think. That'd be my guess. I'm kind of making my temperament sound objectively better by saying I can do both though, so. But I do think it's objectively better to be low in agreeability, so I would say that, yeah. Agreeableness is the general concern for social harmony. Agreeable individuals value getting along with others. They are generally considerate, kind, generous, trusting, and trustworthy, helpful, and willing to compromise their interests with others. Agreeable people also have an optimistic view of human nature. Oh, well, fuck, hold on. Disagreeable individuals place self-interest above getting along with others. Well, no. Well, now maybe you could argue the other one. An agreeable person is optimizing for the social situations, but they can argue or disagree with somebody if they want. They can fight with somebody if they want. I might be using agreeable incorrectly here. In terms of like the 5-factor personality shit. Your assumptions of why JP are wrong. He thought and read more on the leaders and their ideas than I think you'd believe. Okay, I don't know how to convince you of this, but just as a quick thing, if a man who has to say that he is the king is no true king, okay? Saying that you've read or saying that you've done this or whatever doesn't matter. If you've truly read and understood something, you should be able to incorporate it into your own thoughts, your own speech, your own worldview. Yeah. This puts my agreeableness at 65. Openness at 90. That makes sense. They say that people that have done mushrooms have higher openness than, like, it permanently changes. So, wow. Okay, anyway, back to this. Do you think Jordan B. Peterson got so argumentative because he's trying to test if you're truly low in agreeableness? My hope was that he got really argumentative because, 1, I was willing to play back, which is I think is fun, and 2 is because he enjoyed the conversation, and 3 is because he was passionate about the things he believed in. That would be my hope for why he got argumentative. But what was JP like before and after the convo? Was he nice to you? Yeah, most of these people are usually pretty polite in person. Yeah, I think most of these people are really polite before and after, except for Norm. I didn't say a single word to him before and after. The Wayne guy was more polite though. He talked significantly more than you. I think him cutting you off all the time gave you the feeling you had to be more concise than you probably needed to be. Yeah, everybody just likes to talk a lot, especially on their own shows, but whatever. Did you ask him about his daughter ghosting you like 10 times? Nope. Oh, also, I need a list of like the most retarded possible things that you could say about like Kendrick or Drake or J. Cole so that I can troll the out of Big Ak. Somebody write me up like a few paragraphs and I'll roll with it.
A particular game I might be playing.
We already know this.
It might
You've
be,
heard this.
And like
no one cares. Honestly, Jordan's main forte is on the trans issue where he started. The more the subject deviates from psychology, the lower the quality becomes. Maybe, yeah, but man, I've heard him talk about, I think I've heard him say dumb things on depression. He said some outrageously stupid things about ADHD, which is obviously an area that I know more about. So, I don't know. He's wandered. He's strayed.
So is your concern essentially something like the observation that if people are bereft enough of substance?
This is also something I super appreciate. I try to do this with other people. I think I do. I usually try to verbalize this before I answer a question. Is if somebody can summarize what you just said and repeat it back to you in their own words, then it shows that they have an understanding of what you've just told them, and then you can move on from there. As fundamental and simple as that sounds, it's nice when somebody can do that.
The observation that if people are bereft enough of substance, let's say, that it's difficult for them to take advantage of equal opportunities, even if they are presented to them, let's say.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And you have some belief, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have some belief that there is room for state intervention at the level of basic provision to make those opportunities more manifest.
Yeah, to varying degrees, yeah.
So would you be in favor of making college free like in Europe? I don't know where I'm at right now in college. I actually don't know if college affordability is a problem at all in the United States right now. I saw a really hilarious thread pop up yesterday, and it was a thread in Our Economics where it felt like somebody posted a link to shit on how worthless college was becoming or something. But two completely different types of people showed up in this thread. One were students who said they went to college and they graduated and they couldn't find jobs, therefore college was worthless. But the second one was recruiters who showed up to argue about how poorly equipped college kids were to, do work, which was why college was useless, because the kids sucked at everything. And it was funny watching these two people fight each other for what were both stupid arguments. Did I save this thread? This guy describes himself as average looking and says women won't date him because he's Middle Eastern, which is really funny because I'm pretty sure in America and in Canada, I don't think we even see Middle Eastern. It's just if you're dark enough, we'll call you brown. But if you're just like if you're like a light-skinned Middle Eastern person, people will find me on this, but I don't think in America we would think you're like, if you saw Hassan in public, I think you're just thinking like, oh, it's a white dude. You're not thinking like, oh my God, that guy looks like he's from the Middle East. I don't think you're ever thinking that. Same thing with this guy. Oh my God. This guy's posting thinking that because he's 5'9", or maybe he said 5'11". No, he said 5'9", and he's Middle Eastern, that white women won't give him the time of day. I'm like, bro, in the United States, anybody looking at you is just going to think you're white. What are you talking about? Reading through this guy's comment history was so sad. Can you imagine? He's got posts where he's like, yeah, I think I'm just like an average looking dude. Imagine, it's so funny because if a girl were to write anything like this, she would be excoriated. She would be destroyed online. You know when women go to those subreddits where they're like, rate me, or like, am I ugly? r/am I ugly? And it's a girl's like a 9 out of 10. And she's like, do you think I'm ugly? Imagine if you're some 200-pound guy who's 21 years old, who's already 50% into his like male pattern balding phase, and you have a guy like this saying, yeah, I think I'm probably like an average looking guy. Bro, I would kill myself. But it's really funny because he's got in his profile, if you read through his comments, I think he's like, yeah, I listen to Jordan Peterson every day, and he's taught me, like, he talks about like hoflation. I can see him: Jordan Peterson, Chris Williamson, Tom Bilyeu, Alex Hormozy. Oh, we watched a thing by that. Andrew Huberman, and More Plates, More Dates. Oh, he posted on that subreddit too. 100% agree. I've been watching Jordan Peterson explain hypergamy, and it's getting worse if you're not a dude who earns more money than the majority of women. Also, go watch Chris Williamson with Alexander Date Psych on YouTube. They explain really well why men are struggling, but women are doing just fine. God, look at this guy. I was just like, damn, how mindful are you to look like this and be like, yeah, I just think that women won't me because I'm 5'9". My God. Do you think he's above average looking? This guy? In terms of like entire body? Yeah. And even with like a shirt on and stuff, like he's got a nice smile. He's got like a nice proportioned face. His hair looks fine. He's like, what is he, 29? Yeah, his hair looks fine. Like everything. Yeah, he's like, yeah. Looks good with the shirt on, everything. This guy's super, yeah, 100%. Can you explain why women get away with that shit? Like almost all the Asian women are vocal about how they prefer white men. Because I think generally you can shit on men, and if you're a woman and you're like in that category, you can get away with saying retarded shit. But it is really gross though. Like, yeah. Like it should be treated the exact same. Something else is interesting in that there's so many dynamics at play. I haven't heard this from Asian people. I have heard this a lot from Middle Eastern people. I'm trying to think if I've heard any Hispanic people say this. I don't think I've heard any Hispanic people say this. For Middle Eastern people, when I hear Middle Eastern women talk about how they want to date white men, I think that when they say white men, what they really mean is they're doing like the opposite of a passport bro thing, to where passport bros might go to the Middle East or some shit because they're like, I really want a traditional woman. But sometimes educated women from the Middle East are like, I really want to get away from these traditional men. So I have heard that. I've heard that several times from Middle Eastern women who are like, I don't want to date guys that earn less than me and treat me like shit. Or I don't want to date guys that think I'm like a baby production machine. And these guys are like literally second children. Like I have to adopt this man who can't take care of himself. I don't know if that's as true for Asian women or not, because I feel like I'm borrowing a lot of anecdotal here. I feel like the Asian men that I meet aren't like tradcon traditional men. So it doesn't make sense for Asian women escaping those Asian men. But also a lot of the Asian people that I know are going to be like San Francisco, LA Asian guys in like tech communities. So maybe that's not representative. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. There's also a perception of white people being rich. There's an element of status for Asians if they date a white person, in my opinion. Yeah, for ussies, I mean, I understand that in the East, but that doesn't really make sense in America, right? Because in America, bro, every Chinese girl I've hooked up with, these people, like, if I'm visiting them, I need a gate code because they always live in gated communities. They always have huge houses. They're always from hugely wealthy families. Although, again, to be fair, I lived in Southern California. These people were always fucking loaded, though. But maybe, but I feel like on average, it's got to be true that on average, median income, white versus Asian family, household, USA. The Asian one has to be significantly higher. Oh, income. I don't want wealth. I want income. The household median income for Asian Americans in 2021 was $101,418. That's 43% greater than the national median income. What are white Americans at? Racial wealth snapshot. Why do we not have white on here? Indians are by far the wealthiest households, but they're pretty low on the totem pole of dating. Yeah, that's true too. It could be that white is associated with wealth though, and that's like a generationally inherited bias. It doesn't make sense in the environment in the USA, but like people might inherit the bias and they come over here and they still have it. So it'll be bred out in like a generation or two. Sorry, I meant from when I speak to my family / friends back in Taiwan. It's also pretty funny how the psycho the Taiwanese / Chinese incels are, and how they talk about how white men take all the women. Oh yeah, I've heard that. I've experienced that. If you go with Tinder to any like Asian country, this was true in. I didn't have Tinder when I was in South Korea, but I went out a few times with Naniwa, and in where else have I been? Taiwan. In Taiwan, it's insane. If you go on Tinder, there's a white dude. It's like being a woman in America. It's insane, yeah. To be fair, a lot of Asian dudes are pretty misogynistic at times, so a lot of Asian girls here choose not to date them. Think like comp/gamer type of dude who are really sheltered or not social. Yeah, I guess the problem is that like that might be true, but it's so hard for me anecdotally to grapple with that because most of the Asian guys that I know are pretty, I don't want to say meek, but they're like quieter gamer type dudes. Like I'm thinking of people like Albert, like Slightly Musical, that was his name, right? Like that dude wasn't misogynistic at all. Or most of the Asian gamer dudes I knew, all of these guys were super chill. So like anecdotally, that doesn't synergize with what I'm thinking, but it could be true on a wider spectrum. I just don't have that firsthand experience. How do you pull Destiny? I usually buy boots with really thick inserts at the bottom so that I can appear 6'1" instead of my ordinary height of 5'4". I'll try to run a Lamborghini so that if a woman is hypergamous, she can see that she'll upgrade based on the car type that I'm in. I'll usually try to hire 3 or 4 really attractive prostitutes to hang out with me who are 18, 19 max so that she can see that I am signaling high social value. And then after I start talking to her, I'll hold the conversation for about 60 seconds max before ignoring her, so that she sees that I have better and more important things going on in my life. Oftentimes I'll give her my phone number and my Instagram. The phone number will always be the wrong number, so she feels like I don't give a she'll let my Instagram so that she can DM me afterwards. These are all like the super high level tricks that I employ to maximize my pull.
Like, it's very easy for you to get laid in China as a foreigner. Get laid. Get your sucked. It's easy to get bitches if you are a foreigner. Like, I don't want to say this, but it's truth. Because a lot of girls are curious about erotic culture, like a different culture from them. So if you're from a different culture from them, they will be curious about you. How do you know? Because no comment. What about BBC?
Okay.
Like,
does this work for blacks too? I think it might be a little bit harder for blacks because I think there's a lot more racism in Eastern culture against blacks. I don't think black people would have the same. I don't think they would have the same luck. Maybe with some people you like can hyper score, but with other people I think you would. I think it would generally be harder. I'm always reminded of the.
There's an equal mystery on the left and on the right in this regard, is that the more conservative types tend to be very skeptical of big government, and the leftist types tend to be more skeptical of big corporations. Right? Well,
This is one of the reasons why I said on that left-right paradigm, it really only works when you're dealing with liberals, like liberalism, when you're dealing with conservatives or Democrats and Republicans on the liberal spectrum. But if you go far enough to the left and far enough to the right, it breaks too much. He said leftists more skeptical of corporations and the right are more skeptical of governments. Why would you disagree with that? Pointless. Because that's not what the political paradigms work like anymore, you moron. What do you mean? He said leftists are more skeptical of corporations and the right are more skeptical of governments. That made sense 20 years ago in the United States. That doesn't map on to the current political realities. The current political realities, the farther right you go, I say far right, really the Trumples, the new era Conservative Party is actually pretty anti-big business, anti-corporatism. That's a pretty big hallmark of the current populist bend of conservatives. Now, Trump kind of like skirts on both sides of these, but if you listen to a lot of the newer, younger, more kind of like far right people, they're not going to sit here and suck out big business. People like Facebook and these huge lobbyists and the Jews and all these shit are like their mortal fucking enemies. And when you say that, like the right are skeptical of governments, leftists, when you get into like the communists and the socialists, they're super skeptical of governments too. Their entire worldview is informed by U.S. government, USA, everything that the U.S. does and stands for. Everything that the government supports. Even government welfare is bad because what we really should be doing is mutual aid and changing the entire mode of economic organization. So no, what do you mean? It's not irrelevant for me to contest that point. The reality is that doesn't map on to our current political reality anymore. What he's saying makes sense 20 years ago. It doesn't make sense today. If you're being honest, why does it seem like you won all the debates with larger figures when, to be completely fair, you're probably not entirely win-winning? What do you have I ever said that I feel like I won every single one of these conversations? Most of these conversations aren't even over particular topics where we're taking contrary positions. Like, it's hard to win any general conversation where we're just like feeling each other out. Like my conversation with Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, these are like broad conversations where we're bouncing through a lot of topics. It's not one like Norm Finkelstein or one like I haven't had as many like one-on-one particular topic debates recently, but it's not the same style of conversation.
I mean, that brings us into the issue too of whether the left-right divide is actually a reasonable way of construing the current political landscape at all, and I'm not sure it is.
I don't like it when people say that like the conservatives today are like the people of the 60s. When I say potentially, I don't know how much I want to flesh out or fight on every single thing. People get to similar belief sets, but in totally different ways. So it's you have to be careful when you say like horseshoe, for instance. Horseshoe is kind of true in that applied positions can start to mirror each other, but they get there in very, very different ways. The left, the far left, doesn't get to anti-Semitism or the far left doesn't get to anti-Zionism through anti-Semitism. It gets there through anti-imperialism or anti-West or pro-Marxist thinking. That's how it gets there. So even if the far left might look the same as the far right, who might be anti-Semitic or conspiratorial, and the applied positions look the same, Israel and Jewish influence on the United States, and Jews are all up to weird shit. Even though it looks the same in the applied world, they've horseshoed there. They've gotten there. I mean, even by definition, look at a horseshoe. You get there in different ways, right? Yeah.
But
Right now, it kind of is, but only because so many conservatives are following Trump. So like your populist, anti-populist thing kind of maps on kind of cleanly to the left and right. It doesn't work with progressives, though, or the far left, because they're also anti-large everything. So in a surprising way, on very, very far left people, you might find them having a bit more in common with kind of like a MAGA Trump supporter than like a center-left liberal. So for instance, like both of these groups of people on the very far left will be very dovish on foreign policy, probably a little bit more isolationist. They're not a big fan of like a ton of immigration or a ton of trade with other countries. They might think that there's a lot of institutional capture of both government and corporations. So both all of the MAGA supporters and the far, far left might think that corporations don't have our best interest at heart and the government is corrupt and captured by lobbyists. You'll see a lot of overlap there.
Right.
I think that sometimes there's a couple things. One, this is something I feel like I've discovered. People have no principles. I think that people are largely guided by whatever is kind of satisfying them or making them feel good at the time. I think that's a really important thing to understand because people's beliefs will seem to change at random. If you're trying to imagine that a belief is coming from some underlying principle or is.
If that's true, then why do you think it's so common for people who are de-radicalized to just become re-radicalized to the opposing side? Probably because these people don't have a stable system of belief and they don't have a stable like social group that they belong to. So they'll bounce from one social group to the next because they're looking for a group of friends or they feel outside the whatever particular social system they're in and not accepted. So they go from like extremist fringe group to extremist fringe group and you bounce around that way basically. Oh my God, bro, stop pausing the video. Here's the full video if you want to watch it. Good luck. Bye. Permanently banned. See ya. Why do you ban people when you can wait 10 seconds and the message is going to flood away? Clearly you care too much and you're quite fragile in a sense. So the issue is most people, when they are trying to form opinions about people, what they're doing is they are looking at the person themselves and what they do like 10% of the time, and they're looking at what other people say 90% of the time. So in my own community, I have to walk a fine line between like banning people that are just shit posting or providing nothing of valuable substance, or having people that can provide criticism, but it's like of substance. There's plenty of places on the internet where people just flood like random retarded things at me. Why would I let it stand in my community and then reach a critical mass where I've got like anti-fan hate community in my own community? Plenty of other people host unhinged retarded criticism of me 24/7. Like I don't need it in my community. If you have a good criticism, I'll let it stand. If for no other reason, because the community can engage with it, I can engage with it or whatever. But if you're just saying like random retarded shit, like no, like there's plenty of other places. Like if you're gonna accuse me of being bad faith or some shit, why would I ever host that criticism? It's stupid. And I don't want like that. Why would I want that growing in my own community? It's dumb.
Where all people are poor, there isn't much social unrest, and where all people are rich, there isn't much social unrest. But when there's a big gap between the two, there's plenty, and that's mostly driven by disaffected young men who aren't very happy that they can't climb the hierarchy. There are barriers in their way. And so there is reason to ameliorate relative poverty. The problem with that, to some degree, is that most attempts to ameliorate relative poverty tend to increase absolute poverty, and they do it dramatically. And the only solution that we've ever been able to develop to that is something approximating a free market system. I wouldn't call it a capitalist system because I think that's capture of the terminology by the radical leftists. It's a free exchange system, and the price you pay for a free exchange system is you still have inequality, but the advantage you gain is that the absolute levels of privation plummet. And I think the data on that I think they're absolutely conclusive, especially, and that's been
Technically, this point doesn't make sense. If he complained that relative poverty is the driver and inequality is the driver, I like how he uses relative, which I'm pretty sure is a code word here for inequality, because I think that is what drives crime in areas. It's not absolute poverty. It's the inequality between the rich and the poor. Wouldn't it be better to increase the rate of absolute poverty as long as we bring down the inequality? Wouldn't that be a goal if we're trying to just reduce crime?
especially
Now, I don't know if that would follow empirically, but deductively from the premises he set forth, it would seem to be true, right?
demonstrated in the radical decrease in rates of poverty since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, because we've lifted more people out of poverty in the last 4 decades than we had in the entire course of human history up to that date. And that's not least because the statist interventionist types who argued for a radical state-sponsored redistribution lost the Cold War, right? And that freed up Africa to some degree, and certainly the Southeast Asian countries to
Jordan B. Peterson gets away with saying the data/studies on this are clear without saying any data or naming any studies. If I'm having a general conversation, I'm generally not going to be doing like source vetting, like, oh, well, name the study, or like what it's just not worth it for a general conversation. If we were having a precise conversation about something where I was familiar with the literature that's going to be relevant to the conversation, then I will be asking, well, who says that? Where did you get that from? Let's think about that. Like my Norman Finkelstein debate. Do you ever feel extra pressure to not cut them off or hold them to the fire due to their status or authority as an intellectual? Not that you don't see yourself as one, but maybe do you feel threatened at all? No, I don't typically feel threatened in these conversations. I might have felt threatened a little bit in the beginning of the Finkelstein-Wien conversation because I was legitimately curious if I was about to get buried by historical lack of understanding. But in these, it's usually just feeling the other person out. And I don't want to start off as being unhinged. Remember, you always let the other person strike first.
I just wanted to be clear on that. So I'm absolutely a pro-capitalist, pro-free market guy.
You did say that you weren't prepared for the conversation to go into a deep global warming debate. At that point, you weren't nervous. It depends on... There's multiple ways to engage with the conversation. We can either engage on the factual level, where we're going to debate the facts, or I can engage on a philosophical level. So for instance, I can try to point out a contradiction in your argument if I don't have the facts. Now that's a much scarier level to engage on because if the other person is familiar or can maneuver the conversation well, you're going to get completely blown the fuck out. Or I can try to like focus on another point that's more philosophically related and less factually related, which I think is the direction I go, which is I have to re-listen to it, but I think the question was more just like, listen, I'm not going to say I disagree with you or agree with you on particular fact-based things, but like, can't we agree that if people believe this particular thing, it's not because they're all fucking evil, right? Because our main points of contention, remember, the main points of contention between the right and the left don't actually have to do with the fact of the matter of climate change. It has to do with people on the right thinking that climate change is a tool used by George Soros so that we all have to eat crickets in the future and eliminate our population or something. Like that's really the central disagreement.
When you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution. I think the problem...
That was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all, actually, I would say. I think the issue was command economies.
Wait a
minute.
minute. What do you mean redistribution wasn't an issue? What the hell do you think they did to the kulaks?
It's just such a not... like. The Holodomor wasn't an issue of like redistribution, or these huge famines weren't issues of redistribution. They were issues of famine. And then the things that followed, which you could argue it wasn't even redistribution, it was just stealing crops from starving people. It's not really, but I don't even want to, it's just such a dumb, and then to relate this to like redistribution in general just doesn't make any sense.
That was forced redistribution. It resulted in the death of 6 million people. So maybe I'm not understanding what you mean, but that was redistribution.
Also, this isn't redistributing like taxes from wealthy people to poor people. This is stealing food from starving people. Like this is just...
When I think of the strengths of capitalism, the ability for markets to dynamically respond to shifting...
Yeah, but redistribution, as he's using it, isn't taxes. It absolutely is. It's what he's trying to relate it back to. Yes, it's forced redistribution. Yes, it's trying to be... it's trying to be related back to like taxation and liberals, and this is what they... It's just not worth. It's not even worth it to bring this up or go down this rabbit hole. It's just not. It's not worth it.
Consumer demand is like the reason why capitalism and free market economies dominate the world. When you've got socialist or communist systems, command economies, where a government is trying to say, this is how much this is going to cost, this is how much you're going to produce and make. This is a failed way of managing a state economy. Even in places where they still do it, there are always shadow economies and stuff. There were in the Soviet Union that prop up where people try to basically ameliorate the conditions.
Isn't his point land redistribution? Kulaks or large landowners having their land forcibly requisitioned? Listen, if you disagree with me on this, then just disagree with me on it and say that I'm wrong, and that's fine, and we'll move on from this, okay? I haven't done an extensive studying of the Soviet Union. My understanding is for the Soviet Union, for China, the reason why famine and everything got up and was horrible wasn't because they took land from some people, and it wasn't because that of redistribution. The issue is that the country tried to modernize in an incredibly accelerated timetable. So much so that in the course of this modernization and industrialization, they didn't have enough food because they were so busy transforming farmland and shit into industrial land or more productive land that they didn't have the food to feed the people. That this was the huge issue. So to say that it was an issue of redistribution, not really. There are other ways that this exact same thing could have been effected. It just, redistribution was like a part of this, but it's like, it would be like saying the reason why so many Jews died in the concentration camps is because of the type of gas they used in the shower. Like if they would have used Zyklon B, it would have been different. It's like kind of, but not, I don't think, that's not really the central issue, I don't think. Destiny, the issue is collectivism. That is literally about okay, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. All right, that's fine. No, it was. I'm sorry. I'm wrong, and you're right. It was collectivization. You're absolutely right. It was big government, collectivization, and gigantism. You're absolutely right. Okay. Yes.
Conditions that are resulting from said horrible command economy practices. So I guess in a way you could argue a command economy is kind of like redistribution. It's a form of it, but
no, it's a worse problem. If you're pointing to the fact that that's a worse problem, I'm with you
I would say that's
100%.
definitely the reason why these places failed, because they just weren't able to respond to changing conditions.
Okay, so what's the difference between it?
Destiny, is it just me, or is it just me? You seem to start slow, then get stronger as the debate goes on. Is it just because as time goes on, you can corner the opponent? No, it's usually because we're filling each other out. Again, I don't really start super hard. Destiny, you're the only political figure I watch that cares so much about how people arrive at their political opinions. Why is it so important to you, and why don't others care about it? Because how somebody gets there is everything. I don't know how else to say that. It's like once you start doing does it happen in algebra? Probably even in algebra, but certainly once you start doing calc, the answers to your problems don't really matter that much. Most of the points, like we would have like 10 point, 20 point questions, and like I think you get 2 points for the right answer. The right answer is just not that important. The process is everything. Destiny, this is not the first time you've talked with a conservative who isn't familiar with politics and makes significant assumptions about you based on being liberal. Is that an advantage since you can disarm them with the correction, or just annoying that they aren't familiar? I mean, it works in some ways and it doesn't work in other ways. It works in some ways in that they're thrown off balance. So I get like, it's easier for me to navigate arguments because I'm on familiar territory and they're not. And other ways it doesn't work well because people think that I'm lying about my positions. That's like, oh, really? A liberal who is who wants to ban second and third trimester abortions, or a liberal who's pro-gun, or a liberal, they'll think that I'm being disingenuous because of the platform that I'm on. I think Jordan B. Peterson contradicted himself on this statement. Most people who abuse others were abused, but most people who were abused don't abuse others. Wouldn't it mean number of abusers drastically reduced from Gen 1 to the next? Most people who abuse others were abused. Most people abuse others were abused, but most people who were abused don't abuse others. Most people. No, it doesn't. There's a statistical inferencing that makes this work. Go read it on your own. I'm too lazy to explain this. According to Tim Snyder, it was not food shortages, but food distribution that killed millions in Soviet Ukraine, and it was Stalin who decided who was entitled to what. I'm pretty sure the famines were real. I think it was a lack of food. But distribution, absolutely. Distribution, I'm pretty sure, was absolutely a problem in all of these countries, in every communist-style country. Distribution is always a huge problem. Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
Encrypted network in cafes, hotels, or airports, you leave your data vulnerable. Any hacker on the same network can steal your personal data, such as your passwords and financial details. It doesn't take much time.
Who got the food? Wasn't it mainly people in Moscow? People in, what do you call Russia when you don't include, what was the name for like the Russian province? What was the name? Like, would it even be, what the fuck would you call it? So like in the Soviet Union, you had all of the, I don't know the names of the Russia SFSR. Like just the Russian country itself, not including places like Poland or any of the oblasts. Would it be an oblast? But anyway, yeah, I think didn't Stalin prioritize this like European part of Russia more than anything else? I totally get what you're trying to say. Issue is that I think socialism tends to prioritize redistribution over private property rights. When people say redistribution, okay? And listen, if you want to get into a super nuanced argument about this, you can, but Jordan Peterson didn't illustrate this, so I am running on some assumptions. But when people talk about redistribution, they normally talk about taking things from one person and giving things to another, usually taking things from a wealthy person and giving to a poor person. Generally speaking, in the West, that's what we mean when conservatives say redistribution. The Soviets and the Chinese had issues with distribution, but it wasn't bad because it was redistribution. It was bad because of the mode of economy, of trying to figure out from a central governing body what your economic output should be, rather than using market forces. That was the issue. But I wouldn't call that capitalism versus redistribution. It doesn't make sense. I would call this like planned or command economy versus free market or mixed market economy. That's the distinguishing. Maybe I feel like in the literature, I feel like this is how these terms are referred to. I could be wrong. Somebody can link me a paper. Maybe I'm just incorrect. But I haven't heard of a command economy or a planned economy where your inputs and outputs are dictated by a central governing body, irrespective of market forces. I haven't heard of that referred to as redistribution. Redistribution usually refers to tax schemes or taking from the wealthy, giving to the poor, generally. That's it. You just wouldn't call that. It's not like redistribution. You would call it an issue of planned command economy versus free market or mixed market economy. Yeah. Can't you say their command economy is driven by desire for redistribution? I just don't think I would use, because like in the United States, I'm a huge proponent of redistribution. It's an incredibly positive thing. We should absolutely be, because of the fact of marginal utility. We have to do like an Econ 101 course. Okay. I can't do every goddamn fucking explanation for everything. Okay. There's a concept called marginal utility. What marginal utility means is the next thing that you have doesn't matter as much as the thing before it, okay? If we say that this is $10,000, okay? Going from $0 to $10,000 is a really big deal, okay? Going from 10 to 20,000 is not as big of a deal. It's still a big deal. You're doubling your money. 20 to 30 is nice, for sure. 30 to 40 is still nice. 40, at some point, you get to, if you've made $200,000 and somebody takes 10 grand from you, depending on your financial situation, you might not notice, right? This is marginal utility. Marginal utility means that the utility that you get from the next thing tends to decrease, right? Do you see this? If we measure the difference here between the utility that we get, if we look at our curve, the utility you get from one unit to the next, see how it's decreasing, except for my drawing is bad? It's decreasing as the curve gets lower and lower, such that when we're up here, look at the utility difference. It's almost non-existent, right? What this means is that if you're measuring society on a function where we're looking at the overall utility of society, if you take something from a guy up here and you give it to a guy down here, whoa, we've just created so much from that thing, right? If you steal $10,000 from me and you give it to a poor family, the improvement in life of that family, theoretically, for at least some number of months, is going to be massively outscaled versus my $10,000 that I would have just spent fucking your mom 1,000 times, right? That's marginal utility, okay? If this concept is true, which it is, undeniably it's true. If the concept is true, then this is the argument in favor of things like progressive taxation systems. Like, oh, wealthy people can probably afford to pay a bit more because the marginal impact on life is lower. So you take a little bit more from here, you redistribute down here, and then it's like, okay, right? This is a taxation scheme, and I would call this redistribution. Planned economies, we are trying to say, like, there's people here, we can produce this much here. Let's go ahead and requisition 10,000 units from here, and these guys need 10,000 units. Okay, well, these guys need 4,000 units. We're gonna requisition 4,000 units from these guys, and we're gonna run this for a while. This form of like trying to plan your economic inputs and outputs doesn't work, because let's say 2,000 people move here in the course of a year. This central body can't figure out, like, in a very quick and adaptive way, well, okay, well, fuck, how much more do we need to take from them? How much more do we need to transfer here? Do these guys need to send us? It's impossible. You can't do it, okay? This is called the calculation problem, okay? Anybody that tells you this is solved with AI, tell them to rope themselves, okay? This is stupid, okay? But the calculation problem is a famous issue relating to command or planned economies, because you can't figure out. Now, if you have a free market, this problem is solved not only almost instantaneously, it's solved automatically, right? if these guys are all, if we eliminate this bullshit and they're just buying and selling, oh, well, this is super easy. A bunch of people leave here. Oof. Well, all these people left here. So your demand is decreasing. Okay. Meaning that your price is decreasing. Well, or no. Yes, meaning you're not going to sell here as much anymore, right? Holy shit, the demand has fallen so much, people only want to pay $5 per unit when we were selling at $10 per unit. And now these people down here, there's so many population growth, there's so much population growth here. Well, these guys were buying at $10 a unit, now they're buying at $15 a unit. Holy shit, we need to get some fucking trucks to sell food to these people, right? This is how market forces, when you're using supply and demand, are helping you distribute shit throughout your economy in a more efficient manner. The allocation is more efficient. Capital flows very quickly and identifies new money-making opportunities and moves away from things that are moving money in a very quick and efficient manner compared to planned economies or command economies where a central governing body is trying to calculate all this shit on its own. Okay. Nothing that I just spoke about here. None of this, free market versus planned, none of this I would describe as like redistribution. It's just, it doesn't make sense. Like in a free market economy, the producers here are like, in a way, kind of redistributing their supply to down here, but it doesn't make, it's just dumb. Okay. Can you explain why AI can't solve it? I mean, theoretically, if it was powerful enough, it could, but it's so many inputs and outputs. There's so much going on in an economy. There's like there's probably trillions of variables, maybe 100, maybe more than that, whatever is quadrillions. There's just so many variables in an economy that it's hard to adapt to all of it with one central calculator. You might not even have access to all the information necessary to make these calculations. This is super interesting. Why are you so irritated by the topic? Because people's understandings of modes of economy and modes of production are so rudimentary and irritating, and then people have really strong opinions on it that they'll say shit like, oh, well, actually, the reason why the Soviet Union failed is because of redistribution from wealthy people, and it was high taxes that were in. It's like, no, it's not high taxes. No, it's just not. That's not what we're talking about at all. From this logic, wouldn't it be moral to take? Oh, when you look at the Venezuela huge problems, for instance, that was an issue relating to planned economic policies. So, for instance, my understanding is, and I'm pretty sure this is true because I have said this a lot, nobody's corrected me on it, but in Venezuela, the government was saying, these products are too expensive. We think you're ripping off our people. We're going to start using price controls. A price control means that regardless of where your supply and demand curve is, right? I don't know how to draw these because I've never taken a formal class. Suck my dick. Wait, what's the thing? I don't care. Okay. This is quantity produced at a given price. This is supply demanded at a given price. And your equilibrium is where your market exists. So these are your producers. These are your consumers. If you have a widget that's worth $1, they're going to buy 1 billion of them. If you've got a widget that's worth $1 billion, only one person is going to buy it. And for producers, if you could produce a widget for $1, you're not going to produce any of them. And if you could produce a widget for $1 billion, you're going to produce a lot of them, but nobody will buy them. So you meet in the middle here for your equilibrium. What a command economy does is, what a price control does is a price control seeks to shift this equilibrium point in an unnatural way, higher or lower down this curve. So an example of moving it higher would be a minimum wage, that's a price floor. An example of moving it lower would be a price ceiling, right? So for instance, if I think that this is the natural price of corn at $10 a bushel or whatever, well, fuck the, do you buy corn in bushels? I don't fucking know. And I want to say, well, no, we should actually set the price of corn over here. Well, what's happening? The issue with setting the price of corn down here, there's fancy boxes that people draw to measure this that tells you something, but I don't know it off the top of my head. We thought about it if we could. The problem here is that, well, producers aren't going to want to produce as much, right? Well, now you run into a problem because if I produce down here, it might be that my profit level might only be right here, right? I might only be profitable here. So if you move this price control, if you move the ceiling of the price down too low and you force these people out of business, well, now nobody wants to sell products in your country because it's not profitable to do so. And then people stop producing shit and now you're fucked. And I think that was a big issue that happened in Venezuela. That's an issue relating to
hack someone.
Price controls. Okay. What I just described there, by the way, setting a price control that moves the economy too out of whack and causing negative things to happen outside of that price control, that would be considered an externality. No, wait, or maybe that wouldn't be an externality. Maybe that would just be considered, Would that be considered an externality? Where's my econ people? No, actually, that wouldn't be considered an externality. I don't think so. That would just be part of the resulting fallout from your economic policy. I don't think that would be an externality. Never mind. That wouldn't be an externality. Because externalities are things that aren't accounted for generally in whatever economic model you're setting up. An externality is going to be, it's called externality because it's not related to directly to your pricing of anything. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Jesus. All right.
Hackers can make
You
up
realize you are regurgitating Econ 101 nonsense. Firms don't make decisions based on supply and demand, but on markup. Look into Keynesian economics. What? Firms don't make decisions based on supply and demand, but on markup? When you say markup, what do you mean by that? I don't know the term. I mean, maybe because I only did the Econ 101 lecture series. So when you say markup, what does that mean? Are you talking about profit margin or? So glad he caught that. Am I getting trolled? Also, Keynesian economics isn't going to fight against Econ 101. It's called Econ 101 because it just gives you a general guideline to understand, like, this is the general principles of economics. But in the real world, things are going to be more complicated, of course. Look up Keynesian economics as a sentence goes hard. I love you, chat. Okay, fuck you. I'm not getting trolled by this. Okay.
financial details. It doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone. Hackers can make up to a
So is that the argument against rent control? Yes, correct. Yeah, good job. Wow, good for you, Chatter. If I was a teacher, you'd get bonus points for bringing that up. The issue with rent control is that if we draw our curves, okay, if you would supply a given apartment, okay, this is the supplier, this is the consumer. I don't know how they normally draw these. But if you would supply apartments here, but somebody says, oh, well, we're only gonna allow you to rent right here, well, what are you gonna do? You're probably gonna reduce the supply that you offer. You're gonna be investing less into whatever buildings you have. So that might mean less renovations, it might mean less new construction, or whatever. You're gonna invest less because now the price isn't as worth it for you to compete. It's not at where this natural equilibrium point is for you producing a certain quantity for a certain price, yeah. Nice graph to the point you're trying to explain. Supply is the negative slope, the demand is the positive slope. Oh, well, fuck you, I mixed my slopes up. Suck a dick. Maybe you should do your research. Control F markup. How do you change the market point without price controls? Well, you can't, it's not, careful with what I'm saying. Changing the market point isn't necessarily bad, okay? So for instance, okay, hold on. When I'm talking about descriptive things, okay, try to blow this out of your mind if you can. When I'm talking about descriptive things, I'm not saying that these things are necessarily bad or good, they just things that are. So for instance, let's say that there's a supply-demand curve where a company is only profitable here, and this point here represents a $1.50 an hour wage, okay? But let's say that we've set a minimum wage way the fuck up here, where you have to pay this much, okay? Well, if you said the top one is usually the supply, right? Well, at this given price, a producer might not be able to produce anything. They're like, well, fuck, this isn't even worth it. I can't produce actually below like this level. It's too much for me, right? But do we want businesses in society that can only function with paying wages of $1.50 an hour? Probably not. So in that case, having certain price controls that make these things non-competitive might be good. It might be, oh, fuck it, we don't need this business in society, you know? The inverse is demand, you got trolled. I wish I had the same audacity as Destiny to speak on things on which I had the wrong basic understanding of. Everything that I just explained is super Econ 101. What do you think I'm misunderstanding or not explaining correctly? I don't think I've even said anything. I think everything I just said you'd probably learn in week 1 of an Econ 101, of a high school econ class. You did get trolled, supply and demand, or how you had it before. Oh, okay. Any subject you talk about, there's a teacher in here. Triggered? Drew. Isn't the natural price of corn the cost price of making it? Wouldn't you be able to set a fixed price based on that? Oh man, do we want to, I don't know how much we want to do this. No. When you're talking about these supply and demand curves in general, you're not talking about, okay, the specific terms I believe that you would be using is you would be using quantity produced at a given price and quantity demanded at a given price, okay? That doesn't mean what is the base cost. What you're asking fundamentally, or broadly, I guess, what you're asking is how much of a given unit or how much quantity of a given thing would a producer produce given that it could sell it at this cost or at this price? Fuck. So that's going to incorporate things like how much profit do you want to make? What's the raw cost of materials? What's my cost of labor? What's my cost of effort? It's going to incorporate all of those things into your very broad level thing, right? So if I say like I need to sell iPhones at $1,000 each because that's the only person I want to sell them for, that might be with a $100 markup or profit, right? You want to make a certain level of profit, otherwise you'd go and invest in other. I think the term is NPV plus projects, net present value plus projects, meaning whatever your dollars are going into right now represents positive cash flows in the future. So the net present value of your cash investment into a given product, I think, is higher as opposed to NPV neutral or NPV negative things, which is if you're investing money now, you're losing money in the future, I think. But that might be Econ 102 or 201. I didn't go that high. In an ideal market, doesn't the profit tend towards zero over time? Isn't that a Marxist idea? Like the theory of the falling rate of profits or some bullshit? Isn't that a Marxist idea that was never actually proven or never actually came to fruition? No, that's true, Destiny. I don't think that's true. That's not Marxism at all. There's a Marxist idea. What's it called? Why are you saying it's not at all? Isn't that a central part of? That's a central big point on the. It's a central huge prediction made by Marxists. According to Marxist theory, the declining rate of profit is what leads to recurrent crises under capitalism, since it reduces incentives to invest and even spurs capitalists. There's a name for this. I think it's the tendency of the rate of profit to fall is a theory in the crisis theory of political economy, according to which the rate of profit, the ratio of the profit to the amount of invested capital, decreases over time. The hypothesis gained additional prominence from its discussion by Karl Marx in chapter 13 of Capital Volume 3, but economists as diverse as Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill, David Ricardo, and William Stanley Jevons referred explicitly to the TRPF as an empirical phenomenon that demanded further theoretical explanation, although they differed on their reasons why the TRPF should necessarily occur. I don't think this has necessarily been observed, right? Like, wasn't this basically saying that all profit is going to fall to zero at some point, but it still has maintained like relative consistency over hundreds of years? Jesus Christ. It's just because the market gets so competitive that it approaches cost, right? That feels like it just makes sense. Well, I think that for that to work, okay, last side pivot. I think for that to work, I think that only works if you assume perfect frictionless competition. That every person can enter a market with zero friction. Everybody can produce a given good or service at the exact same cost. That everybody has perfect access to all markets, that every consumer has perfect access to all information. I think that in that world, theoretically, if I could go and create a phone as efficiently as Apple, and there was no such thing as like an economy of scale, there was no such thing as market access, there was no such thing as advertising, then maybe, but that world doesn't exist. So I don't think that would ever happen. Hold on, I might have to go have a shootout with the cops. 1 sec. I'm just gonna use the bathroom. 1 sec. Jesus. I just got to the part where Killua and Gon got abducted by they're not called the Shadow Troop. It was the Shadow Beast. Oh, they're called the Phantom Troop. Are they going to kill Gon? Destiny likes to say, I'm a capitalist, and then astutely argue against most key tenets of capitalism. Let me have it. What? Everything I just said is squarely. What are you, Puffy Shirt 681? What did I just argue against that's against capitalism? Are you guys? I feel like you guys are like. I feel like this is you guys crafting like the perfect retarded bait statements to try to trigger the out of me. I feel like the rate of profits to fall hypothesis is true in some markets. Like I doubt plastic straw manufacturers are making as much profit as they did a long time ago. Maybe, I don't know. But the rate of profits falling wasn't a market specific analysis. That was supposed to be an analysis of the entire market or all markets, right? This would be an amazing one guy emote. Holy shit, why don't we have this? Do you support Keynesian or Austrian economics? Anybody that says that I'm like a Keynesian or Austrian, it's so reductive. What do you mean? There are different policies. Both of these schools are going to approach different aspects of economics in different ways, but I doubt you're going to have like a completely and totally 1 billion% orthodox take on the entirety of the economy using just one like school of thought. I'm sure any modern economist is probably incorporating thoughts and ideas from plenty of schools of thought into how they view the economy, right? Okay. Destiny comparing taxation and redistribution in the United States to the coercive redistribution policies of the Soviet Union was the most retarded thing I've heard him say in a while. You're so close. My whole argument is that you wouldn't compare these two things. They're not comparable. That's why I don't like it when thank you for summarizing everything. Yes, it would be retarded to compare those things. That's why I don't like it when somebody says, oh, the Soviet Union did redistribution. That's why I'm against progressive taxation. Because of everything I just explained, it wasn't really a redistribution. It was a whole different economic mode of organization. Okay? Okay.
Why doesn't a government that's bent on redistribution fall prey to the pitfalls of command economy and forced redistribution, for that matter? How do you protect against that?
I think what you have to do is very, very, very difficult is people get very ideologically captured by both ends, and they feel very, committed, or they feel very allegiant to pushing certain forms of economic organization. And I think sometimes it blinds them to some of the benefits of what exists when you incorporate kind of multiple models. Or
I think all I'm saying is that like the way to avoid it is you just try to maintain like a heterodox view, I guess, on running economies or government, right? Like don't get completely ideologically captured from one side to the other. I feel like it's maybe it's a little indirect. I wonder if anything was cut before this, but I feel like it's...
I mean, you call them mixed economies, which is really what every capitalist economy today is. It's some form of free market capitalism combined with some form of like government intervention to control for negative externalities. These are the ways that all economies, even in Scandinavia and the world, work. And I think that recognizing the benefits of both systems are the best way to make things work.
Fair enough. And the Scandinavian countries seem to have done a pretty good job of that. But like I said, they have a simpler problem to solve, let's say, than the Americans have. Negative externalities. That's an interesting rabbit hole to wander down, because the problem I have with negative externalities, you made a case already that, and again, correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think that I understood what you said. A free market, free exchange economy is a gigantic distributed computational device.
Basically, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Which, funnily enough, one of the big problems for command economies is called the computation problem, because no central body can actually...
Actually, it's called the calculation problem, a retard.
Compute, the ins and outs of...
Right, exactly. Right, that's not... Yeah, that's a fatal problem, right? Because it doesn't have the computational power. It certainly doesn't have the speed of data recognition. It doesn't...
Why do you do that, though? He's asking you, not where do other people make the mistake. I swear you answer 30% of your questions with what people don't understand. Well, because the implication is this would be a mistake you should avoid. Like if somebody says, how do you avoid the pitfalls of going too far to one side? My answering, oh, well, I just don't, because that would be stupid. I think the answer would be like, well, you have to be careful to do this or that or avoid this or that. I think you're generally speaking more generally. If he asked me, if he turned it around, I was like, okay, well, if you were the dictator, how would you avoid this? And I would give a different answer, but...
Doesn't have the on-the-ground agents if all of the perception and decision-making is centralized, right? It's way too low resolution. It's going to crash. Okay, so, and I think that's comprehensible technically as well as ideologically. All right, so... But having said that, with regards to externalities, all the externalities that a market economy can't compute are so complex that they can't be determined centrally by the same argument. And
there are ways to account for them, though.
Really?
That work with...
Tell me.
Yeah.
How. Because I can't see that. Because I can't see how that they can be accounted for without the same computational problem immediately arising.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I think that's a problem sometimes of people very far on the left when they want to deal with certain problems. I think that they want to bring like heavy-handed, like things like price controls in to say, well, we need less of this, so let's just make this cost this particular thing, which ironically enough introduces a whole other set of externalities that will happen when you get a lot of friction between where your price floor or ceiling is set compared to what a market would set it at. But ideally, if you're a reasonable person and you view economies as mixed economies, what you try to do is you try to take these externalities, meaning things that aren't accounted for with your primary system. So in a capitalist system, an externality might be something that causes a negative effect, but it doesn't cost you any money. Pollution would be a good example of that. And rather than saying like, well, no company can pollute this much, or, if you're a company, you have to use these things because the other things are making too much pollution, all you do is you say, okay, well, if we've determined that, say, carbon is bad for the atmosphere, well, we're just going to attach a little price to that.
Okay,
Government is going to say that, yeah, if you pollute this much, here's the price. And then if you want to pay for it, you can. But that type of intervention in the economy basically allows the free market to hopefully do its job because the government has tacked on a little bit of a price something that tries to account for the cost of that externality. Yeah.
Great. That's a great example. We can go right down that rabbit hole. Carbon. If you ameliorate absolute poverty among the world's 1 billion poorest, they take a longer view of the future. And that means they become environmentally aware. And so the fastest route to a sustainable planet could well be the remediation of absolute poverty. And the best route to that is cheap energy. And we're interfering with the development of cheap energy by meddling with the hypothetically detrimental externality of carbon dioxide. And so
a lot of right-wingers seem to think you lost this exchange on the climate change. Well, every exchange where they disagree, they're going to say I lost. They're going to say the same thing with vaccines and everything too. Again, I'm not trying to appeal to like the hardcore right-wing people, just like people in the middle that kind of like wander through basically.
The first thing, this is going to sound mean, but I'm very realistic. There needs to be a better argument than just it disproportionately impacts the poor. That's not always
a classic leftist argument.
Sure, it might be, but
right, but it's the same argument you made to justify your swing to the left at the beginning of our discussion. You said that you were looking at economic inequalities that disproportionately affected the poor. So
One thing that's very frustrating,
I
ask for. I do debates where I ask for a piece of paper to write things down. This happened a lot with Finkelstein and Moyne. And I have so many points written down here that I want to respond to. I think later on in this debate, I tell him, like, let me finish, and he lets me. But I've written down so much that I wanted to respond to for what he just said. But then he like goes off on another tangent after I do a sentence, and I'm like,
economic inequalities that disproportionately affected the poor. So I can't see why.
How bewildered were you at this point? I'm actually not bewildered at all. On any of these points, because I know where they're all coming from. These are like really standard conservative talking points, but they typically tend to be non sequiturs that don't. They're non sequiturs that come from an emotional place. So, for instance, saying things like climate change impacts poor people more. That's not an argument against. Or I'm sorry, climate change policies impact poor people. That's not an argument against climate change policies. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, if we are to believe that climate change is going to destroy the planet, it doesn't matter that policies might impact poor people more, because the overall net benefit to hurting poor people versus destroying the planet is obviously self-evident. There's a greater benefit there, right? So the question becomes one of like factual disagreement. So a lot of the arguments they don't really stack up. They just don't say anything meaningful. Like sin taxes negatively affect poor people. That's not an argument against sin taxes though. But I think I'd even written down, that point to respond to, but I don't know if I ever get to directly because he always,
And I'm not trying to be mean about this either. I can't see why you could base your argument that it was more.
His argument is that you're gambling with poor people's lives. Yeah, but you understand that's the same argument on the other side as well, right? That if climate change is real, it's going to impact poor people more than wealthy people. How many people moving are going to be people in more impoverished areas that are near coastal areas, that are closer to the equator, like some of the more impoverished countries anyways? Like these are going to be people that are going to be disproportionately impacted. It's going to be poorer people rather than wealthier people. Do I say this? Oh, I hope I say this. Okay.
Well, because it depends on if we think it's a condition that ought to be remedied or not. For instance, if I walk, around and I see homeless people and I'm like, man, this is really sad. We ought to spend more money on homeless people because it seems like they're disproportionately affected by their living conditions. And then somebody says, oh, well, do you think we should still lock up, rapists and murderers? Aren't they disproportionately poor?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I did say, well, yeah, we probably should. And I go, well, isn't that hypocritical? Well, no, I think that rapists and murderers should probably be in jail, but we can also help the homeless at the same time. I think that just helping the poor isn't an argument like a blank check to do every possible thing to satisfy poorer people.
Right,
It's going to depend on from issue to issue.
That's fine.
So, like, for
But
instance,
that's
I think
because the poor, everyone who's poor is not a victim. Some people who are poor are psychopathic perpetrators.
sure.
And it's very useful to distinguish them. But I was making a much more specific argument.
Jordan Peterson would be the kind of guy to say that stopping Shinra would hurt the poor people in Midgar. True. Destiny, how do you respond to Shapiro's talking point that why aren't real estate prices plummeting on the coasts? It depends on how much people have factored in rising. Aren't there places where the sea level has risen a bit where real estate costs are starting to reflect that? Hasn't that happened in some places? I don't check real estate prices much, so.
Bottom billion people is through cheap energy.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. So just working my way towards that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that just because something targets the poor is not necessarily an argument against it.
Depends on how hard it targets them, and it depends on whether mass starvation is the outcome.
The outcome is important. That I agree with. So, for instance, like a sin tax.
The
taxes
outcome will be mass starvation.
Yeah, I'm
in this
getting to it. Okay.
situation.
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Okay. Sin taxes on like cigarettes and alcohol are always going to disproportionately impact the poor, or even sugar, we might say, right? But just because that disproportionately impacts the poor, is that a good thing or a bad thing? These are probably the people that suffer the most from those particular afflictions. Right. So,
Do you think there is sufficient proof that climate change is real by modern models? If so, there's a good enough reason to hurt the poor now? Yeah, but I mean, you obviously don't want to hurt the poor. You want to mitigate that as much as possible. But I'm pretty sure, I don't think climate change is debated much in terms of, is it a thing that's happening? Is it largely human driven? I think now the questions are more like, what is the impact it's going to have on the planet? And how can we adapt to that?
And that is an
tax that
immediate
targets-
versus delayed issue too, right? Because the reason,
is it immediate? I mean, obesity isn't immediate. I don't think alcoholism
the reason
is.
for
Your video is top 5 view-wise of JP's videos on his channel. I don't think that's true at all. I don't think it's even close. He's got tons of multi-million view videos on his channel. What are you talking about? Popular? I have to go down like 50 videos or more. What?
So I'm curious, let's say that we think we can accurately predict the climate and the economic impact, and we think that the climate impact would be far worse if we don't account for that, both in terms of human
I
conditions
don't believe any of those presumptions. I think
but
they're
then
both
if you
faulty.
don't, but I mean, like, obviously, if I agreed with that factual analysis, I would probably agree with you on the prescription here too, right? If
Well,
I thought
I
that like
don't-
none of the climate models were accurate or couldn't accurately predict anything,
They're
then I'd
not
also say why
sufficiently
make.
well. They're not sufficiently accurate. That's the first thing. And
I don't like that he's not engaging with my point here. I feel like we get sidetracked a lot sometimes. Like, I'm trying to draw a distinction here between the applied theory versus, or not even the applied theory. I'm trying to draw a distinction here between the conclusions that we're drawing based on the premises before us. That, of course, we're drawing different conclusions based on the premises before us, but if we agreed on the set of premises, we'd probably agree on the conclusion. But he's not engaging with that. He just is really triggered on the climate change thing.
I also say why make.
sufficiently- well,
I shouldn't have uttered the word carbon. I didn't realize that was going to be a 40-minute trigger point.
Prescription here too, right? If
Well,
I
I
thought that
don't-
like none of the climate models were accurate or couldn't accurately predict anything,
they're
then I'd
not
also say why
sufficiently
make.
well. They're not sufficiently accurate. That's the first thing. And because they have a
He's
margin
just bad faith. I don't think he's being bad faith. I think he feels very passionate about this particular thing.
of error, and it's a large margin of error. They don't even model cloud coverage well. That's a big problem. They don't have the resolution. They don't have nearly the resolution to produce the accuracy that's claimed by the climate apocalypse mongers.
People
Not even
keep saying
close.
that, but we just got another one of the hottest years on record. How many times are we going to have another hottest year on record? How many times are we going to have an increase of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere before we're finally like, okay,
I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because it depends. The scientific answer to that question depends precisely on the time frame over which you evaluate the climate fluctuation. And that's actually an intractable scientific problem. So you might say, well, if you take the last 100 years, this variation looks pretty dismal. And I'd say, well, what if you took the last 150,000 years? Or
Yeah,
the
but the
last
problem-
10,000 or the last 10 million? You can't specify the damn time frame of analysis.
The time frame is incredibly.
I wouldn't say he's bad faith, but do you think he's a bit senile? Jordan Peterson, senile? No, I don't think so at all. No.
Million. You can't specify the damn time frame of
That's
analysis.
the time frame is incredibly important. That would be like saying, look at your, let's say somebody developed cancer and they didn't realize it, and the person has lost, 40 or 50 pounds in the past 6 months, and I'm just like, you look very sickly. And you're like, okay, well, look at my weight fluctuation over the past 10 years. You say, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters
I'm
is
not
the fact
saying
that
the
past
time
6
frame
months-
isn't important.
Well, but I'm saying that,
That's a good point. That's a good example on the fly, too. That's, yeah. Of
Like,
course, the time span is important. If human activity has just caused an increase of carbon concentration in the atmosphere for the past 200 years, why would I use a 10 million year or 100,000 year time frame? Of course, the time frame is going to be relevant to the variability, whatever we're talking about, right? Which is carbon in the atmosphere or surface temperatures.
10 years. You say, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters
I'm
is
not
the fact
saying
that
the
in the past
time
6
frame
months-
isn't important.
Well, but I'm saying that, like,
it is important.
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
no.
saying I don't know how to specify it.
Well, you would probably specify it with the beginning of the industrial age, right?
Why?
Because that's when carbon dioxide, which is a gas that's seen as trapping more heat on the
Why
planet,
is that
begins
relevant to the time over which you compute the variability?
Because it seems like as carbon dioxide has increased in the atmosphere, the surface temperatures have risen at a rate that is a departure from what we'd expect over 150,000 year cycles of temperature variations on the planet.
Not with
Good job. Okay, I answered this way better than I thought I did.
that time frame. That's
Absolutely.
just not
1,000 year cycles of temperature variations on the planet.
not with that time frame. That's
Absolutely.
just not the case.
It's absolutely the case.
No, what do you mean? You just flipped to 150,000 year time span.
What I'm
So-
saying is that if we expect to see a temperature do this in a 150,000 year time span, in a 100 year time span, seeing it do this, that's very worrying. Now,
I
it
mean,
could be
like
the
Michael
case.
Mann's hockey stick, the one that's under attack right now in court.
I have no fucking idea what the we're talking. I feel like I just got sucked into a PKA podcast where we're talking about sports. Wait, what?
I'm talking about the record temperatures that have been declared for like the past 5 years that have also increased with the concentration of parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that every model is perfect.
They're
but
not
right now,
perfect.
Sure, but right now we're like standing in traffic with our eyes closed.
He always feels the need to interject that. Like, most of the time I'll hedge. I'm like, these things might not be the best. They're not the best. Thank you. That is indeed what I just said.
I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I
think that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature detection sites were first put outside urban areas.
I heard this talking point first from Lauren De Laguna. I didn't know this was a popular conservative conspiracy meme, that now that we measure temperatures inside the cities, the thermometers are warmer because the cities are warmer because there's too much heat from the buildings and everything.
Detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure. This isn't data. This is guess. And there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it.
I don't think the increase in hungry people on the planet is because of climate policies.
Why not?
Because I don't think that countries in Africa are being pushed away from fossil fuels. I mean, most developing
Of course they are. They can't even get loans from the World Bank to pursue fossil fuel development. And there's plenty of African leaders who are screeching at the top of their lungs about that, because the elites in the West have decided that, well, it was okay for us to use fossil fuel so that we wouldn't have to starve to death and our children had some opportunities. But maybe the starving masses that are too large a load for the world anyways shouldn't have that opportunity. And that's direct policy from the UN, fostered by organizations like the WEF.
Oh,
They're
boy.
going to have to turn to renewables. Yeah, well, good luck with that, because renewables have no energy density. Besides that, they're not renewable and they're not environmentally friendly. And then one more thing. There's
It's
one
like
more
every
weird thing
in like 1 minute, it's like every single conspiratorial talking point, every single one. The WEF, renewables actually cause more pollution. They're not energy dense. Poor people are being killed. The WEF is forcibly killing poor. It's like every single talking point in like 2 minutes, 1 minute. My God. Do you agree with this position on overpopulation, the anti-human sentiment? No, that's a completely and totally fabricated like conspiratorial talking point that's usually strung together by 2 or 3 different 10-second voice clips. Anybody that truly believes that is not a person generally to be taken seriously on the topic. It's always like an unhinged. It'll be some person will say something like, right now on the planet, we are reaching critical levels of having massive populations that can't be supported with the food and energy infrastructure that we currently have. If the planet were half as populated as it could be, like that might be potentially a more sustainable path for the future, but the current course we're on, blah, 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 blah. And then people will take like a minute speech like this and they'll clip out the 5 seconds and they'll be like, they said that if the planet had half as many people, ... Klaus Schwab, who is part of the World Economic Forum, also funds this company, who owned this shell company, who was a holding company for this other company that was charged with creating a drug that caused a child to die. They were trying to kill all your children. This is it's always like stupid.
This is something that I brought up earlier that is concerning to me. I feel like when people get political beliefs, I feel like what happens is, what we think happens, what we'd hope happen is you have some moral or philosophical underpinning. And then from there, you combine this with some epistemic understanding of the world. And then you combine these two things.
Hold on real quick. This point has nothing to do with Klaus Schwab. It's just a typical progressive buzz phrase of too many people on the planet. I don't know if you've never heard this stated. You might be in La La Land. The point is not to say that there are too many people on the planet. It's that conservatives take this point and they make it sound like progressives want to eliminate half the people or sterilize half the people.
But I break really hard from progressive.
I think we had a thing in the subreddit for it.
On the right, I think basically everything you guys are doing with indigenous people is insane, including the complete mass grave hoax. I think that I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I have beliefs where I can break from my side, pretty hardcore because I am not like allegiant to a certain political ideology. One thing that worries me with this constellation of beliefs thing is that sometimes when it comes to evaluating a particular policy or a particular problem, I feel like it's part of the constellation, and sometimes it inhibits people from like taking a step back and reasonably thinking about the issue. So when we're talking about climate change, you mentioned the WEF sacrificing tons of people, the UN, global elites, 5 times energy costs in Germany, genocidal people. I feel like this is part of like a whole thing where it's like, okay, well, let's take a quick step back and let's just like think rationally about this particular issue for one moment. Okay.
Well, you asked me what the motivation for anti-poor policies might be, so that's why I was trying to flesh
but
that out.
But I got all of those things before I even asked that question. Because I think it's totally possible that somebody might say, okay, well, when you put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it seems to cause an increase in surface temperatures. This has been happening from about the 1800s. And as we started to track surface temperatures, whether the thermometer is on top of the Empire State Building or in the middle of the field, it seems like there's an average rise in temperatures. And people all around the world are observing this. In some places more than others. If you live in Seattle and 20 years ago, your apartment building wasn't built with air conditioner units, you feel that now. If you live in a place in London and you've never had an air conditioner before, now that's not acceptable. I think that people on the ground can see that there are changes. And I think that scientists, when they look in labs, can see changes. It might...
He's dominating the debate, and you're not coming back with anything that refutes his claims. You're just casting doubt, but no real counter-argument. True. That's a really good point. Thank you, Dan A. I need more retarded conservatives because I'm not used to functioning like at the 75 IQ level. So I'm not trying to think of like, what would a 75 IQ person watching this conversation think in terms of my responses? And that is true. You cannot refute claims that start from nothing. I can never refute the claim of the elite are trying to kill everybody because there's nothing to refute there. There's not a single piece of evidence given. The only piece of evidence given are facts that we both agree on, but the scary part is the conclusion being drawn or the story or narrative being woven from those facts. That's irrefutable. How can I fight back against a 7-word quote from the WEF? That's not what I'm trying to do, is fight back against your just so story that happens to explain everything in the world with your particular set of bad guys at the helm. Damn, thanks for the 5 gifted subs. So my goal here in the conversation is to introduce maybe a second way of looking at these facts, where I say like, hey, maybe it's actually not evil people that are controlling everything. Maybe some people look at this stuff and they say, hey, well, this might be the best thing we can do for humanity, so let's do that. That's my goal.
Observing this. In some places more than others. If you live in Seattle and 20 years ago, your apartment building wasn't built with air conditioner units, you feel that now. If you live in a place in London and you've never had an air conditioner before, now that's not acceptable. I think that people on the ground can see that there are changes. And I think that scientists, when they look in labs, can see changes. It might be that some models aren't precise enough. And it might be that for reasons we don't even understand.
Well, the economic models certainly aren't precise enough.
Sure, maybe that might be true.
Maybe. They can't even use them to predict the price of a single stock for 6 months. The economic models are not sufficiently...
Finance and econ are two separate things. Inability to predict an economic thing. It's like the difference between... Do I use the example, the difference between weather and climate? I hope I do. It's such a one-to-one analogy. Please tell me I bring this up.
Accurate to calculate out the consequences of climate change over a century.
Yes?
And
not in the least.
I like the comparison because economic models can't predict individual stocks, but they do predict the rough rise of the market. If you invest in the S&P 500,
you get cataclysmic collapse.
Nope. Even with the cataclysmic collapse accounted for, you're going to see about 7% returns on average with inflation over long periods of time.
I wouldn't call an average a very sophisticated model analogous to a climate change.
That's the difference between climate and weather, though, right? Is that climate isn't going to tell you what the temperature is on a given day, but it might tell you the average surface temperature over a period of 1 year or 10 years. And then that's the difference between climate and weather. That's the difference between like the market and the stock.
Difference.
It is a hypothetical, but again, we're seeing more.
No, it's not a hypothetical. It's definitionally true. What do you mean, dog? Climate is not what's the climate today. The biggest mistake was putting weather systems in cars called climate control because it's confused a whole generation of boomers.
more and more data every single year that things are getting hotter and hotter.
Let's jump out of our cloud of presuppositions for a minute.
Sure.
Now, one of the things that...
Or no, wait. Before we do that, actually, because
I have so many things I've written down, I didn't get to like half of them.
There are some things that we've gotten as a result of investing in green energy that have been good. So, for instance, the power of solar energy has dropped.
Sweat Croc has donated $20. Destiny, stop wasting 3 clicks. Use blah, 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 and no one cares.
Dramatically in the United States, faster than anybody thought possible, such that solar energy is like competitive or beating fossil fuels in certain areas. As long as you can set the solar panels up, you're literally beating fossil fuels.
Yeah, and as long as the sun is shining.
Well, it still is. We're not in nuclear winter yet.
No, but it isn't when it's cloudy. And
that's why I said depending on where you live. There are places, equatorial places, if you're trying to set up a solar panel in Seattle, you might not have as much luck, or in New York City, you might not have as much. Or in Germany, true.
I don't know in Germany how. Apparently in Germany, I think they are actually okay for solar panel coverage, but I'd have to go and check.
Also,
Europe,
I think
in Canada.
There are also other issues.
What is the point of bringing up every random place where it doesn't work? Use windmills. Christ.
That are coming up that I think are obfuscating our ability to evaluate what's being caused by green energy versus not. When we look at energy increases in Germany, I think there's a similar constellation around nuclear energy, for instance. People don't want nuclear energy because they think of nukes, and they think of nuclear meltdowns, and they think of Chernobyl, and they think of Fukushima, and they think of atomic bombs, and that's it, and that's stupid. And I agree with you. But nuclear energy is a totally viable alternative to other forms of fossil
Then why
fuels.
does the radical left oppose it? You think it's just this
For the same reason the right opposes vaccines, because it sounds scary and it's a big thing and they don't trust it.
Oh, that's such a good comparison. God, that was such a great one-to-one mapping on of a similar irrational drive getting you to dumb position on the left and right. Good one, Destiny.
Well, the right has a reason to distrust vaccines.
And the left feels like they have a reason. Say that. And the left feel like they have a reason.
They were imposed by force.
Well, you should say, and the left... Oh, no. I think I do this here. Oh, this is such a good...
You get to choose if you have a nuclear power plant. That's imposed by force too, no?
Yep.
You don't get to choose where your energy comes from if you live in a country. You turn the light switch and...
I watched the clip of this. I can't even believe I thought of all this on the fly. God damn.
By force too, no? You don't get to choose where your energy comes from if you live in a country. You turn the light switch and hopefully you don't have a Chernobyl that melts down in your particular town, right?
Well, you get to choose it because you can buy it or not.
Well,
that's a choice.
It does, but
nobody had a choice with the vaccines.
Nobody had a choice whether or not they lived near Chernobyl or not. Nobody's a choice.
Sure,
there's a nuclear power plant.
Away.
Well,
then you're just not working in the U.S.
Move like 500 miles. That's like telling conservatives when Biden tried to do the OSHA mandate for vaccines, you can just get a different job, right?
I don't want to debate about whether or not large nuclear power plants are frightening. They are.
Sure.
I don't know. It's not bad faith. I genuinely go into these conversations curiously. I like to have the conversation. I'm trying to think of the rhetorical stuff, but I am curious. It's fun to have the conversation. I feel like this is a string of W comparisons and argumentation, and to let him moonwalk away from all of them and be like, I don't want to do this topic. After I just wasted 20 minutes on climate change, I'm actually like, you know what? We are going to talk about this.
Don't we? Isn't it more likely that people are either misinformed?
Love you. See you debating the big dogs now. Please update your wardrobe, though. Please. You look like a bum in these high-end debates. Love you. I agree, and I have started to. That's why right now this is a Ralph Lauren shirt, and I've got a Ralph Lauren blue set of sweatpants on. So don't worry, buddy. I'm one step ahead of you.
Or misguided, then people are legitimately trying to depopulate the planet.
I'm necessarily aware of what that driving force is.
Don't we? Isn't it more likely that people are either misinformed or misguided than people are legitimately trying to depopulate the planet?
This is such a good line of questioning. This is what I went into this debate wanting to see. Is it like, can't we admit that it's more likely people are misinformed or misguided rather than like intentionally malevolent evil forces roaming the planet? I just wish I could have gotten here like 45 minutes earlier, Socratically, rather than the ramble of everything that came before this.
Look, misinformed and ignorant, that's plenty relevant and worth considering. And
I think it's telling, too, that he doesn't want to directly confront that question.
Look, misinformed and ignorant, that's plenty relevant and worth considering. And stupidity is always a better explanation than malevolence. But malevolence is also an explanation. And no, I don't think it's a better explanation because...
Why would we waste so much money sending food aid, having Bush do, programs through Africa for AIDS, having other billionaires like Bill Gates invest so much money in anti-malarial stuff? Like, why would all the global elites be so invested in helping and killing the people here at the same time?
Well, some of it's confusion.
Okay.
And some of it's the fact, many things can be happening simultaneously with a fair bit of internal paradox because people just don't know which way is up often. But the problem with the argument, okay, so you tell me what you think about this.
I feel like this is good because I think he's not stupid. He's not. And he does know a lot of psychological facts. He says things that are true on a theoretical level. Like he just said that, like, well, yeah, you know, stupidity can explain things, and stupidity can explain a lot before malevolence. So he knows these things. So we can kind of like plug into some of these internal drives and try to wiggle him to a slightly more reasonable position. Like, okay, maybe all these horrible, evil things are happening, but at the very least, they're mistakes. They're not intentional. They're not by design, right?
The problem with the argument, okay, so you tell me what you think about this. So
this seems kind of like how Destiny would describe the Destiny support group back in the day. He was cordial during the conversation, and now he's acting like Peterson is just a nut job. I don't know. Okay, I might be using harsher terms here, but I'm saying basically everything I said right now to him in the debate. I described the whole constellation of beliefs. I said that I thought that he was falling prey to this. I feel like his arguments were ascribing way more to malice than to stupidity. I'm just being a little bit harsher here, but it's not like I'm pretending to agree with him. I'm just not fighting on every single point as well because we don't have the time, and it would be...
So, you know, Hitler's cover story was that he wanted to make the glorious Third Reich and elevate the Germans to the highest possible status for the longest possible period of time. Okay, but that wasn't the outcome. The outcome was that Hitler shot himself through the head after he married his wife, who died from poison the same day, in a bunker underneath Berlin while Europe was in flames. Well, he was insisting that the Germans deserved exactly what they got because they weren't the noble people he thought they were. And then
Destiny, in the paywalled part, you literally tell him you think he's audience captured. Oh, I don't even know what gets paywalled or not, yeah. It's insane seeing him jump to malevolence now when his old speeches seem to stress the importance of assuming stupidity using shooters, and I think even Hitler is an example of trying to understand what true malevolence is. I can't believe brains can be broken this hard. It is, and you know what? You saying that just jogged my fucking mind, and I don't think I do I? If I would have quoted this old speech back to him, it would have been so interesting to see his take on it now. I think it was Jordan Peterson that did this.
The Columbine. You know, I read about the Columbine massacre and the kids who undertook it. That'll make your hair stand on end if you want to read something that will really disturb you. Reading Eric Harris's writings will really disturb you. No matter how much you know about human beings, reading Eric Harris's writings will disturb you. And Harris is Cain, you know. He says it straightforwardly. He hates human beings. He hates being itself. He would destroy everything if it was within his power to do that. And of course, him and his colleague were motivated to produce far more carnage than they managed that day.
Are you against professors grading student attendance in college? I don't know, bro. That's a hard one. I think you should. I think for freshmen you should. But also, like, if you can pass the test and do the coursework, like, I mean, fuck, I don't know, bro. That's a hard one. It's the difference between, like, am I taking a student side of the argument to where, listen, if I can do the work and I can pass the test, why the fuck do I have to go to your class? Versus, like, the enriching environment for all students, and then the environment, like, in a more utilitarian, like, to create a better environment for everybody and to increase the likelihood of success. So, like, you should probably attend class. I always thought the most dangerous pitfall, at least for me, was the first time you skip class your freshman year and nobody gives a fuck. You don't get in trouble. You don't get a detention. Depending on your classes, you don't even get a bad mark. That's an addicting feeling. That first time, you're like, wait a second. I can skip class and nobody cares? That's more addicting than heroin, okay? Yeah. I remember my freshman year of school, I had to rein that shit in. I was like, wait a second, I just don't want to go today. And I could just not go to class today. Fuck it.
And that also means, you know, that you don't look for the, what would you call it, the purveyor of malevolence outside yourself, right? It isn't someone else, even though sometimes it's someone else. You know what I mean? It's like there are identifiable perpetrators, but that's not precisely the point. The point is something more like that the proper place for the encapsulation of that malevolence, at least the proper place to start, is within the confines of your own existence, and then perhaps within the confines of your family. And that way you're not a danger to those that you misapprehend as malevolent and evil, because you won't get your aim right to begin with. You'll identify them improperly. And you'll
it was this. Okay, yes. Okay. If you feel like other people are evil, or you don't know where evil comes from, you should begin with an analysis of the self to figure out like where it could come from in your own mind, to figure out how you could even get to these some of these positions. And if you don't understand that about yourself, you won't understand it about other people. This is the end, especially
within the confines of your family. And that way you're not a danger to those that you misapprehend as malevolent and evil.
Yes.
Because you won't get your aim right to begin with.
Yeah.
You'll identify them improperly, and you'll take your revenge in a manner that allows you to omit your own responsibility, to act out your unconscious desire for revenge, and to move the world just that much closer to hell.
It would be interesting to see what he thinks about that, because he's so quick to identify people that are pro-climate change as being malevolent. Like, doesn't this contradict with your prior assessment of people that you should do a deeper understanding of where people's views come from and everything? Yeah.
Claims. Well, he was insisting that the Germans deserved
People keep asking about if we're using a boom mic or whatever. I don't think we are. I think we're just using clip-on mics here. But
exactly what they got because they weren't the noble people he thought they were. And then you might say, well, Hitler's plans collapsed in flames, and wasn't that a catastrophe? Or you could say that was exactly what he was aiming for from the beginning, because he was brutally resentful and miserable right from the time he was,
Destiny, you are so professional. JP does not know how to keep his cool, very emotional. I think emotional is better. I like him when people are emotional. I don't have any complaints about his demeanor or being emotional. I think that's totally fine. I just didn't like being cut off or him talking so much more than me. That's the only thing that bothers me. But I don't mind people being emotional or passionate.
a rejected artist at the age of 16. And so he was working or something.
It looked like boom mics in that one pic you tweeted out. Oh, they might have used boom mic. There might have been a boom mic and a clip-on mic then. There might have been both.
Regarded as demonic. So he was working, or something was working within him, and something that might well be regarded as demonic, whose end goal was precisely what it attained, which was the devastation of hundreds of millions of people, and Europe left in a smoking ruin. And the cover story was the Grand Third Reich. And so there's no reason at all to assume that we're not in exactly the same situation right now.
I think there's a great reason to assume. I think that Hitler's motives and everything that he was trying to do wasn't a secret. I don't think that anybody had to guess that he was incredibly anti-Semitic, that his Aryan supremacy was going to lead to the destruction and the murder of like so many different people in concentration camps. Like none of this was a secret. It's not like he was hiding it.
He hid a lot of it.
I mean, like he tried to maybe hide the death camps, but nobody in Germany was wondering like, wow, crazy that pogroms are happening against Jewish people. That's so crazy. Or wow, they're all being shipped to just mainly the Jews to camps to work. Like, that's kind of interesting. Or, wow, he talks about this a lot in Mein Kampf, but maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't think you can compare, like, Hitler to people that are worried about climate change. The worry that I have here is because if we're applying this...
People in Germany thought Hitler was perfectly motivated by the highest of benevolent...
If I were to take this standard of evidence and apply this lens of analysis, couldn't I say the exact same thing about the conservative constellation of belief? They don't want to intervene anywhere in the world because they don't care about the problems there. They're anti-immigration because they hate brown people. Trump wanted to ban Muslims from coming to the United States because he's xenophobic. Conservatives don't want to have taxes to help the poor because they want homeless people to starve and die in the winter. But like, I feel like
some of that's true. And yes, you can adopt...
It's such a non-central response. Like, obviously what I'm saying is assessing all conservative beliefs as coming from an evil, malevolent place would be equally foolish as assessing all leftist beliefs coming from a horrible place. But the way they just like, well, some of that might be true. It's like, but that's obviously that's not my point, right?
Die in the winter. But like, I feel like
some of that's true. And yes, you can adopt that criticism. I think the difference with regards especially to the libertarian side of the conservative enterprise, but also to some degree to the conservative enterprise, is they're not building a central, gigantic organization to put forward this particular utopian claim. And so even if the conservatives are as morally addled as the leftists, and to some degree that might be true, they're not organized with the same gigantism in mind.
I don't bring this up. I don't think I thought of this at the time. Does gigantism only happen when there's a lot of different people involved, or could one person amassing a ton of power be gigantic? Because a fascist authoritarian leader could theoretically be gigantic in terms of the structural power that they possess, even if it's not like a big government. And a large government with very little power could be gigantic in one sense, but very small in another sense. I wonder how you would respond to that. I don't think I bring this up.
And so they're not as dangerous at the moment. Now, they could well be, and they have been in the past. But at the moment, they're not.
Do you really believe that Trump will ruin the country if he is reelected, or are you being hyperbolic? I'm like 40% serious on that. The issue isn't really Trump himself, it's just what he's turned Republicans into. There is a fear that the centralization of power under Trump, or the flagrant abuse of norms in certain institutions, could destroy the country in some ways that are very hard to come back from. it would depend on how sophisticated now of a political actor he is, because before his level of sophistication and political understanding was almost non-existent. If it's any higher now, then things could look a lot scarier. You said the conservatives support cancel culture for things like music and games in the 2000s, but that's not true today. Yes, I literally explained why. Didn't I just say that? I'm trying to reach out at the same time. Didn't I just say that when people have power, they like to cancel shit, and when they don't have power, they don't cancel shit? So yes, back then, I think in the 2000s, conservatives had way more cultural control, generally speaking. So they would cancel shit they didn't like, but now they don't have as much cultural control, so they want to, have free speech for everybody, right? The world was peaceful when conservatives had control circa 2000? Excuse me? Are you forgetting that we started 2 multi-decade Middle Eastern conflicts under Bush? Are you forgetting the whole run-up to the housing crisis in 2007? Peaceful for who? Or for which part? What are we talking about right now?
I'm not disagreeing that the Holodomor happened as well. The Soviet Union and China were horrible. I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not going to. Say those were horrible things. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So war.
Why do you let JP strong arm you? It's not. It's just. It's trying to figure out like, what do I want to argue on? Like, do I really want to argue if things like famine or if like. Do I want to argue if these things count as like leftist? It's just, I just don't want to have this. We've already wasted an hour and we haven't talked about much. Why would I want to? It's just picking the things I want to fight with. And I'm kind of thinking here, like, do I want to fight at this point? And I don't. It's okay. I'll give it to you. Whatever. I'm trying to interest. Or like, would the leftist governments of Mao and Stalin be comparable to progressive taxation in the United States? Like, I don't think it's worth arguing. I think fuck it.
I'm not going to say those were horrible things. Yeah, of course.
And so war of.
I'm just saying for World War II, it depends on how much you attribute the war does to Nazi Germany.
I shouldn't even talk. Just move on from this.
But sure, like largely speaking, I don't think that the left beat the right because the right wasn't trying. I don't think it's because Hitler's lack of trying led him to kill less people than who ended up dying during the Great Leap Forward or during the industrialization of the Soviet
Yes,
Union.
well, I also think it's an open question still to what degree Hitler's policies were right-wing versus left-wing, and no one's done the analysis properly yet to determine that.
Well, what do we
Because he
consider?
was a national socialist movement for a reason. And the socialist part of it wasn't accidental.
Well, but there was no, cooperatively formed businesses that were owned by all of the people for the people and distributed to the people. And I don't think redistribution was high on Hitler's list of things to do for.
That's true. It was a strange mix of.
Which is a cornerstone. Wait, what do you mean strange mix? Which part was leftist? But I don't want to get into the argument of like, they've got Nazi. There's socialist is in the name. I mean, Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. What is the DPR? What the fuck is it called? The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK. Like, yeah, I mean, yes, they do have it in the name. That is correct. But like,
if I would have been able to hang on to my professorship at the University of Toronto, would have been to extract out a random sample of Nazi policies and strip them of markers of their origin and present them to a set of people with conservative or leftist beliefs and see who agreed with them more. And that analysis has never been done as far as I know. So we actually...
See, that I don't think I asked it because I don't want to do this debate of were Nazis left or right. It's such a dumb debate. But a good question, if I wanted to go down this road, is what do you think is a Nazi policy that more left-leaning people would agree with than right-leaning people? Because if he's just going to say like, well, Hitler built more, roads or expanded manufacturing for the wartime economy. Like, come on, is this really... These are the policies that come to mind that are evocative of Hitler's regime?
Don't know. And we could know if the social scientists would do their bloody job, which they don't, generally speaking. That's something we could know. We could probably use the AI systems we have now, the large language models, to determine to what degree left and right beliefs intermingled in the rise of National Socialism.
If I had a better understanding of the history of Hitler, we'll do a World War II. Wait, do I have this? We should do this. This is going on the things to research. Oh, we did college. Fuck this. We're done with this. Oh, I should have a color for marking it off. Hitler's rise to power should be a thing. If I had a better grapple on all the underlying facts, I bet there's a sophisticated argument that I could put forth here where it's like Hitler didn't rise to power because of a left versus right paradigm. It's actually due to unsophisticated populations that confuse the utilization of left versus right paradigms, but in reality, they're just falling for populist figures that are promising them dumb things that don't correlate well with their political values at all. For instance, like conservatives voting for Trump think they're doing it because he's some big conservative leader, but it's not actually correlating with any of their values at all. It's because he's a populist leader and he owns the left, right? Sure. Like that, because I can't tell. Are you genuinely suggesting that Hitler's rise to power and his maintaining power in Nazi Germany was done on the backs of appealing to left-wing voters? That's the implication of what he's saying. Do we really think that's the case? It's obviously not the case. And when you think about like his rise to power, if I were to start listing positions, right, intense xenophobia, blaming everything on a mysterious group of people in power that seem to control all of society, who also have a big interest in credit scores and interest rates, racial superiority, obsession with dominance hierarchies.
That's all technically possible.
Like these typically don't sound like left-wing beliefs. Not to say that the far left people were better, but I think there was a different way that left-wing people maintained their authoritarian regime. It's just a different path. The KPD literally worked for the NSDAP interests. I mean, like, kind of. People say, so leftists will lie and say that the Nazis never worked with the communists early on in Nazi Germany or worked together, which is a lie. But then other people will say, oh, well, they worked together, which is kind of a lie. The reality is that, now, conjecture, boom, okay, conjecture time. I think the reality is that when the administration is failing for whatever reason, a certain people, which I think were the Social Democrat Party at the time, when it feels like they're failing, it gives it an opportunity for extremist parties to come up and say they can do a better job. And the KPD and the Nazi people were those people that said that we can do better. At times, they both wanted to work together over the people in power, the SOCDEMs, because they thought they could do a better job. So they, would vote for each other or run or do attacks in the streets, other dumb shit. In the lead up to Hitler and the takeover power and everything. So I don't think you could say that like, oh, they never worked with each other, they never liked each other, but it's also not really fair to say they worked together like they were on the same team. I don't think they were on the same team. They just were all, they were anti-liberal. They didn't like the SOCDEMs at the time, so they were willing to watch the system fall. The same way that like Bernie bros and Trumples might have been both against the establishment, but I don't know if they were truly on the same team, if that makes sense. Wasn't there an actual right-wing party in Germany at the time? I imagine the Nazi Party was the de facto left-wing party. What? I don't think they were ever considered a left-wing party. That's not my understanding. I've never read that or seen that. But also, I haven't studied pre-World War II Germany or the Weimar Republic or something. I haven't studied it. It's a great deal, but I've never heard of the initial Nazi Party ever being viewed as a left-wing party.
I think that the issue that we're running into right now, more than anything else, is people live in completely separate realities at the moment, such that if we were even to describe basic reality, how many illegal immigrants came into the United States last year? That should be a factual number that we can know.
How many do you think?
The actual number, probably in the hundreds of thousands. I think some conservatives think it's 3 million per year over the past 3 years because they look at like border contacts or they look at asylum seekers and they're not looking at like crosses and loss.
I think it's 3.6 million.
Came into the U.S. and stayed?
Yes, through the southern border.
Okay. So
the historical.
Wait.
Oh God! I'm so triggered. Like, are you about to jump into a hole? No, hold on. Let me fucking Jesus Christ! I can't like at any point out before we jump into a hole. Jesus.
I understand the shirt. Well, historically, there's like 13 to 15 million people.
I think the number is actually a little lower. I quote this, but it's a bit high. What he says is, I think he means border encounters, but I don't even know if I want to fight on this point. I feel like it's so sticky talking to people because I don't know if I can bring up anything without it like going into a whole other fucking rabbit hole of conspiratorial nonsense. Oh my God.
Stop in the United States illegally. That's like the whole history of illegal immigration in the United States. But hey, maybe I'm wrong there, right? So we can say that that's an example of us living in a fundamentally different reality.
Well, the Pew Research Group has established quite conclusively that the variability over the last 20 years for illegal migration in the south border is between 300,000 and 1.2 million.
Well, the Pew Research can only establish, I think, the number of people attempting to cross. I don't know if they can. No, I don't know if Pew does like census analysis. I'd have to see.
That's a different issue, right?
Sure.
Because I don't know how you measure how many illegal immigrants there are actually in the country.
I understand. I just want to point out.
That's that's a good point. There you go. Right? It is hard to measure. That's true.
I agree with you. I listened to a lot of Rush Limbaugh growing up. I understand the fear of having a government agency say climate change. Therefore, we have a blank check to do whatever we want. That's scary.
Which is what they are doing.
The conservatives do the same thing, though.
I'm not claiming otherwise.
Yeah, but the problem is I think people don't talk about it. So, for instance, so we can pretend now that the conservative argument was just compulsory vaccines are bad because they infringe on my freedom. That wasn't the conservative argument. The conservative argument was that mass deaths were going to happen, mass side effects were going to happen. There was going to be all this corruption and stuff related to vaccine distribution, to the crazier theories were microchips and blah, blah, blah. None of that came true. Absolutely none of the conservative fear-mongering related to the mRNA vaccines came to fruition. But now that's all forgotten. And that was used as an excuse.
What do you make of the excess?
Oh gosh.
What do you make of the excess deaths?
For related to vaccines, there are almost none. The mRNA vaccines have been administered
excess
for
deaths
related
in
to
Europe.
vaccines.
Random question. You're still going to debate Vinny from the PPD podcast? No, they said that they dodged after the Candace debate. I don't know why. They just said that after that they didn't want to do it.
Almost none. The mRNA vaccines have been administered
excess
for
deaths
related
in
to
Europe.
vaccines.
We don't know. No.
We absolutely know. We absolutely.
Wait
This
a
is
sec.
like
What do
settled
we know?
science.
What do we know?
In terms of vaccine related
No.
deaths,
That's not my question. Excess deaths in Europe are up about 20%, and they have been since the end of the COVID
sounds
pandemic.
really high to me. 20%.
Go look.
I'll check afterwards, but is this including like the Ukrainian war with Russia?
No, it's not including the Ukrainian war.
Okay.
No.
Are you implying that you think it's because of vaccines?
I'm not implying anything. I'm saying
I hate that. That's so disingenuous. I'm not implying anything after he brings up excess deaths in response to me talking about the vaccines. It's such an obvious implication. And I think I actually make him own this point later, right?
what the excess deaths are.
But what is your take on what's causing it?
Well,
You said that
I don't even know if what are excess deaths Europe? Somebody emailed me and said they were like 7 or 6% or something. I don't know what the actual excess deaths Europe over last year. Excess mortality. This is month over month, right? For 2023. So what was the total by the end of the year here? I mean, I guess it's going to be year over year, probably 6.5%, maybe? Maybe 6%? 20% is wild. That would be insane. But 6%. I mean, even 6% is, but okay. What's excess? How can they know how many will die? Well, it's just based on prior numbers, basically. So they try to guess what the numbers should look like next year. And if more people are dying than average, then there's like a percentage increase or decrease for excess deaths. Oh, this is where he got it.
3,123 excess deaths, 4,164 excess deaths. 22.5%, 26.4%, 19.8%. And we see this all the way through the year. Deaths being above what we would expect, apart from slightly below on week 10, slightly below on week 14, and slightly below on week 429. But otherwise, all the other weeks where there's data, this is basically up to week 30, which is roughly the end of July, 36,316 excess deaths. It is clear the excess deaths were not limited to.
Are you going to have another debate with Jordan in the future? If he wants to. Who is this guy? This is a nurse that started off doing analysis of research that was coming out at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And a lot of his initial analysis was pretty insightful. He seems to be able to read medical literature and translate some facts to people in a pretty effective manner. And somewhere down a few months, I don't know what happened or why or when, he started to go down the huge conspiracy rabbit hole to where his interpretations of things and the data that he chose to look at became super ultra conspiratorial. And now he's basically like a COVID alarmist, anti-vaxxer relating to mRNA vaccines and all that. And he just basically, if you're conservative and you hate everything I'm saying right now and you want the best anti-vax, the best pro-COVID is killing or is a fake pandemic and blah, blah, blah. If you want all that, this guy's channel is the way to go because this is where a lot of that shit originates from, basically. European excess deaths, official data. European excess deaths, record excess deaths. Yeah, this is the guy. This is probably where where these talking points are coming from, would be my guess. JB tries to meme again as a Euro expert and hoping that his opponents are insecure and making a call and often gets away with it, which is frustrating. Cool.
So
whose risk of death at COVID was so close to zero that it might as well have been zero.
When you're talking about a disease, the risk of death isn't the only thing that you worry about for the disease. There's also
so you're going to talk about transmission? Because that was another thing that...
He's like, he wants to jump right immediately to the next talking point. Oh my God.
only thing that you worry about for the disease. There's also
So you're going to talk
long-term-
about transmission? Because that was another thing that the
we can talk
COVID
about
vaccine
transmission.
pushed. Yeah,
We
but
can-
it didn't
hold on.
do anything
We
to
can talk-
transmission.
It absolutely did, because it decreased your chance of getting infected. It didn't get rid of transmission, but it reduced
Yeah,
transmission.
but
by
it was
reducing your chance of getting-
claimed that it would get rid of
Only if
transmission.
you take one reading of one single quote. I think that
Oh, give
Biden
me a
said one
break.
time where he said, "No, come on, I've heard so many."
I'm incorrect here. It's actually a bunch of bad readings of a bunch of quotes. I thought it was just one bad quote that it was coming from, but people have fabricated a ton of quotes retroactively now. You can see that on my Twitter when I argued against that one guy who was supposed to be having a COVID debate with me, who seemed to duck out. But
times because everybody say, "Oh, you can't take anything Trump says seriously." Biden one time on the news says, "If you get the vaccine, you won't
That
transfer the
is so
disease,"
silly.
which was it. No,
Do you know that our prime minister in Canada deprived Canadians of the right to travel for 6 months because the unvaccinated were going to transmit COVID with more likelihood than the vaccinated? So this wasn't one bloody statement. This was
hold on.
thorough government policy
What
in
I'm
my
saying
country.
is there wasn't a statement given that if you get vaccinated, there is a 0%.
I and everyone I know actually believed the vaccine would prevent us from getting COVID. No, you didn't. Nobody believed that at the time. I wish I would have remembered this for this debate, but the best knockdown argument for this was when Hutch came in, and he reminded me of the fucking meme at the time, which was the meme at the time was everybody was fucking memeing about which vaccine you got. Did you get the Pfizer one? Did you cuck out and get the Moderna one? Or did you super cuck out and get the J&J one? Everybody was talking about the protective percentage, the protection, the immunity, what was it? What did you say? I don't know, whether you got like the 96% vax, the 94 one, or like the 85 one. Did you get the J&J? Like that was what everybody was talking about at the time. This idea that everybody thought that all the vaxes were 100% effective is retarded. The only people who thought that were conservatives that weren't listening to any real news that wouldn't get it anyway. Like the only people that thought that are irrelevant because you guys were never getting vaccinated because you're ready to throw out whatever anti-establishment dipshit will tell you whatever the fuck you want to hear because it makes you feel better than everybody else or feel good about the world or some stupid shit. I don't think the memes are a great representation of the public's perception of what was going on. What do you think a meme is, you fucking retard? What do you think the term meme or memetics, what do you think this even comes from? As an analogy to, or as an analog to genetics or genes. The whole point is that memes represent some like cultural idea or cultural phenomenon that become widespread as a result of that. It wouldn't make sense for a meme to be incredibly popular if it wasn't indicative of some sort of cultural or societal truth. It wouldn't make any sense.
100,000 rate of acute myocarditis or pericarditis is not a worse side effect than any other vaccine. I think that is a completely acceptable, given that the disease itself is more likely to cause myocarditis or pericarditis.
Yes, I don't think the data suggests support that presupposition anymore. The latest peer-reviewed studies show that that's simply not true, especially among young men.
So there is an age bracket of young men where the elevated rate of myocarditis, acute myocarditis from the vaccine might have been high.
Why is it that I totally forgot about that and truly believed that I thought the vaccine was 100% effective? Like, it's crazy how you mentioning the meme made me remember that suddenly. I don't know, dude.
Pharmaceutical companies have helped us tremendously throughout the...
Right, there we go. Fine. No,
think modern
I don't
medicine
think
hasn't?
so. No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think they're
You're
utterly
completely wrong.
I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies who dominate the advertising landscape was...
Have you seen Anthony Magnabosco's Street Epistemology series on YouTube? Was impressed by his rational engagement with constellation beliefs rooted in faithless social motion. Wait, aren't you talking about Peter Boghossian, or do they do that together?
The pharmaceutical...
Ironically, AstraZeneca wasn't even mRNA. I know, that's a funny talking point to watch conservatives wrestle with. Like, bro, there were non-mRNA vaccines, and some of them had side effects, yeah.
Companies who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt.
Corrupt is a very broad...
No, it's...
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence, willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line? You don't believe that?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Okay.
Like, I don't even know where I'm at this point. This is why I feel like this interview was so, like, Jesus Christ. I'm like so defeated. What are we even talking about at this point?
Do you think that any vaccines work?
Yes.
Do you think that any...
I don't think 80 of them work at once.
How many vaccines are even? Ordinary vaccine schedule, USA. I don't know the number of. We've got from birth to 18 months. Does this mean you're getting 2 separate injections? So I wonder if you count this as the same vaccine or different vaccines. If I count every injection on its own, we've got 2, 4, 5, 7, 11, 19, 22. There's the COVID. 23, 24. I don't think influenza is even required. 25, 26, 27. 27 shots. And then from 18 to 18, 28, 29, 1. What is this green shit? 33, 34, 35, 36, 30. And this is if I'm counting flu shots. 39, 40, 41. Okay, so like 43, 42, around 40, I guess. If we're counting each of these as different vaccinations, which I don't think most people would, but do you think he means the available vaccines, including all the competitors? No, people just have this idea that like after the COVID vaccine came out, that children were, basically that old theory of autism is caused by vaccines has started to come up again. And now people think that the vaccine schedule is way too much, literally just completely based on emotions. There's no actual argument for why it's too much. It's just it feels bad, and then people throw around numbers, and it's like, okay.
Do you think that any...
I don't think 80 of them work.
Like even at that, let's say the number was 80. Why don't you think 80 of them work? What do you like?
At once for babies. I think that's a little risky.
But yet we...
The ultimate problem was that the mRNA used new technology, and this was just never conveyed to the public effectively. People are stupid. I feel like when most people say the issue was this or that, I feel like it's actually just retarded conservatives that never were going to get vaccinated anyway. That's what it feels like. Like I feel like I could wander into like a conservative cope session on vaccines, and they're like, well, the big problem was if you wanted to get vaccinated, you had to get vaccinated by purple fire-breathing dragons. And I'm like, the fuck? I've never heard of this in my life. And you're like, well, that's what everybody was talking about. And when they say everybody, they mean that in their conservative circles, they all thought that purple fire-breathing dragons were the ones doing the vaccination. Like, nobody else thought this. This is like in your wild as fuck circles. And you guys weren't going to get vaccinated anyway for whatever reason. Right? Like,
bet on this vaccine. Do you think that any...
I don't think 80 of them work. At once for babies. I think that's a little risky.
But yet we've bet on this vaccine schedule for how many decades?
Like
and babies
this.
don't...
Like this. Not like this. Not carefully.
I had a ton of vaccines when I was a child. I'm pretty sure that was the norm for people.
The funniest thing is that like, and there's no way to run it twice, so conservatives would never be honest about this. But the funny thing is if mRNA vaccines had been created first, to where, oh, you take the protein that you want to train your body against, or rather a piece of mRNA that helps you manufacture the protein that your body is going to fight against. If mRNA vaccines had been created first, and then we created the attenuated virus vaccines after, holy shit. Because in those vaccines, you're taking an actual, I think it's only viral. Is it bacterial? It might be only viral. You're taking an actual virus that's like been weakened in a way to reduce its effectiveness in your body. And you're injecting that into your body, an actual live human killing murder virus into your body to train. I don't think those vaccines would have ever made it off the ground, even though that's like a standard vaccine type, are the live attenuation ones. It would have never, yeah. In fact, actually, most people probably don't even know about those types of vaccines. I bet if I described that Pfizer has a new technology that lets us take a weakened virus and inject it into people, that this is a way that maybe we could try. I bet people would immediately, out of hand, say that that's horrible and crazy. I'm never gonna let somebody inject me with a fucking virus.
It wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course
no, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It's
What,
not.
because it have a 100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? The whole point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein
It's
to
not
train on
the
so that your
same
immune system works.
technology.
Who cares if it's not the same? There's
They
different
used
types
the word
of...
vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines
There certainly are,
that are
and
different technologies.
fine.
The mRNA vaccines is a type
This
of
used
vaccine
to be
technology.
vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this and now it's like this.
No. It was like this and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical, qualitative leap forward in technology. You can call it a vaccine if you want to, but it bears very little resemblance to any vaccine that went before that.
What does vaccine mean? Do I ask him this? What do you mean when you say vaccine? What does that mean to you?
And the reason it was called a vaccine was because vaccine was a brand name that had a track record of safety, and shoehorning it in that was one of the ways to make sure that people weren't terrified of the technology.
And
I
you
think
know,
the reason
I
it's
can
called a vaccine is
understand.
because they're injecting you with something
Is that true, actually?
that's inoculating you against something in the future because it has protein.
Was vaccine initially a brand name? I don't even know. Where does the name vaccine? I don't know what the name vaccine comes from. What are we looking for, the etymology? Etymology. He's speaking figuratively. Okay, I didn't know if it was actually like Kleenex or something, but.
And
I
you
think
know,
the
I
reason
can
it's called a vaccine is
understand.
because they're injecting you with something that's inoculating you against something in the future because it has proteins that resemble a virus that infects
There
you.
are
Your immune system can
overlaps
train against.
between the mRNA technologies and vaccines, to be sure, but they wouldn't have been put forward.
They're
with
not overlaps. It's functionally what it is, or the purpose of what it's trying to do.
technologies and vaccines, to be sure, but they wouldn't have been put forward with the rate that they were put forward if they weren't a radical new technology. And it's bad in principle.
What do you make of the fact that the definition of vaccine was changed by the CDC? It's a dumb fucking talking point. And I think it has to refer very specifically to like a patent or something. I looked this up a long time ago. I've forgotten all of the retarded conspiracies around vaccines. A vaccine is some form of inoculating agent that you're giving your body, something to help you train against a virus in the future. There are plenty of different technologies to do this. Every vaccine that came before COVID wasn't based on just the same technology. You've got live attenuated viruses, you've got completely dead things. There are multiple forms of the early inoculation of shit was like rubbing disease shit on people or in sores. Didn't George Washington, am I making this up? Okay, hold on, I'm about to say something. I don't remember if I'm making this up. Were they gonna cross the Delaware or some bullshit in George Washington's early army? If you got a sore, did they rub a blanket with smallpox against like open wounds? Am I making this up or did this happen? There are tons of different technologies that have been used for inoculation in the past. I don't remember if I'm making this up or not. Smallpox, rubbed, sores, inoculation. Oh, maybe it's a myth. WebMD. Material from smallpox sources inhaled or rubbed into the skin. It was hoped that it was given the smallpox to replace the practice. I don't know. Maybe this is a meme. Maybe it's not true. Blowing smallpox material up the nose of the child being inoculated. Insufflation. Okay.
To inject billions of people with an untested new technology.
Isn't it also bad in principle for billions of people to get infected with a worldwide pandemic that initially was causing a decent number of deaths, a ton of complications, shutting down world economies?
Maybe it was. Maybe it was.
Maybe.
Not just the excess deaths.
I agree.
It's the VAERS data.
What is VAERS data?
It's the data.
That was dirty. Oof. I don't normally quiz people. I must have been triggered to ask of that. I don't normally ask people a clarifying question like that, but I wonder why I felt confident doing it here. I wonder if I was just so irritated by all the misinformation that I...
Just the excess deaths.
I agree.
It's the VAERS data.
What is VAERS data?
It's the database that until the COVID-19 pandemic emerged and we had the unfortunate consequence that there were so many side effects being reported, it was the gold standard for determining whether or not vaccines were safe. And now as soon as it started to misbehave on the mRNA...
Did he respond correctly? Not really. That's why I don't know why I asked it, because I don't think I call him out. Or I think I explain afterwards, right? VAERS, I don't even know what it fucking stands for. VAERS. Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting would be my guess. VAERS. That's probably what it stands for. System? Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, yeah. VAERS is just like if you get a shot, if you go home, if anything bad happens to you, you call your doctor and you say, hey, this happened, and then they put it in a spreadsheet. That's all VAERS is. It's not a study. It's not well researched. It's not confirming any actual study. It's just saying like, hey, yesterday I got vaccinated. Today I tried to fuck my wife, and for some reason I'm having trouble getting an erection today. Can you write this down? And then they write it down. If enough stuff shows up in a VAERS database, people will look into it. Like, oh, a lot of people are reporting this type of reaction to a particular thing. But VAERS, I mean, when you're bringing unprecedented attention to a particular vaccine, people are going to be way more noticing any health effect that's happening after a vaccine. They're going to call in and report these things. That doesn't necessarily mean they were caused by the vaccine. VAERS doesn't establish causal links. It just gives you a temporal link between a thing and a thing, a vaccine and a side effect, right? I got vaccinated 2 days ago and now I have a headache. So you call in and you might report it. That's it. It doesn't mean the vaccine caused it. It's just reporting to give you a link between two things. And then eventually there'll be research to see if there's something scary there.
go ahead and like call my doctor and make this report, and they'll say, okay, well, it's an adverse event after vaccine. Doesn't mean the vaccine caused the headache. And now that more people know about this system than ever,
I'm saying
I'm
that
just
the
saying that
VAERS
theirs is
system
not
was
the gold standard of determining if a vaccine is working or not.
What?
Compared to actual longitudinal, prospective, randomized controlled trial
You
studies.
mean like the ones they should have done to the goddamn vaccines?
Like the ones that they did do for the vaccines, and they continue to do to this day. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
You really
That
think
is how that obviously that is what the studies were. Yeah.
that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of
It's 99% meme, Destiny. 99% of people were fine. That's not what matters. COVID misinformation is the thing that makes me feel the most homicidal of all the topics that I cover, okay? This is one of the cases where we have to talk about absolute number, because the absolute number actually matters here, okay? If you have a disease that is fine for 99% of people, kills 1% of people, and hospitalizes 5% of people, that doesn't matter if only a small percentage of society gets affected. But if everybody gets infected, that 1 in 5% number, even though it might be a low percentage of the overall population, is a huge absolute number that hospitals can't deal with. That's why when the vaccines came out, we were talking about social distancing and all that shit, we were talking about flattening the curve. What the fuck do you think that referred to?
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent. When you go outside,
I don't have to trust
Of course
third-
you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you
I can't believe he wanted to fight on this point. What do you mean you don't trust third parties? I should have just asked him about his clinical practice. Did you do all the research for a psychoanalysis? Did you do all the research for any drug? Because he was just like, did he go to medical school? I thought he did, right? So you could like prescribe drugs. How do you know if any of these drugs work? Do you just trial and error them on all your patients?
extent. When you go outside,
I don't have to trust
Of course
third-
you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope your engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottled water you got it out of isn't contaminated or
He
poisoned.
didn't go to
with
med school?
cholera.
Is
When you got
it just PhD?
as a consequence of consensus.
No, you of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? How
Don't
many times
play
do you wear
Hume
the...
with me. You
I'm
know
not
perfectly
playing
well
Hume.
why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we have to trust third-party institutions to make
Except when they
determinations.
use
I thought here, and I didn't because I didn't want to do like, I don't know if it counts as a personal attack or not, and I try to stay away from these, but I thought about going in here, like when you went to Russia for your treatment and you have like an induced coma and all of this stuff, you're giving literally an infinite amount of trust to the people around you that they're going to take care of you and operate in a proper way to deal like appropriate medical treatment and not harm you, whatever, right? Like this is the ultimate moving something from one person to another. Delegate, it's not delegating. I always want to say delegate, but there's a better word, but you're what am I thinking of? What is Hume? Hume is a philosopher, and he was trying to pull on some, I don't know, Hume for some inductive reasoning there. So I don't know. But yeah, this is like the ultimate. You're moving trust onto another party or whatever. Transference of trust, I guess. Yeah.
Then we have to trust third-party institutions to make
except when they
determinations.
use force. How about that?
Especially when they use force. We trust the police officers. We trust the
We
judicial
do.
systems.
We do. We on the left trust the police. Do
to
we?
some extent, do we? If somebody's breaking
That's
into your
why we
house, who do you
defund
call?
them.
I'm not a defunder, but if somebody's breaking into your house, you can be the most defund person in the world. Who are you going to call? Are you going to call your neighbor? Are you going to call
Ghostbusters?
Joe Biden? Are you going to call Obama? Are you going to call the Black
I should have said the Ghostbusters here.
Panthers? You're going to call the
Okay,
cops.
so tell me this. Tell me this then, because the core issue.
Would you be okay with COVID vaccinations actually forced by the military? Genuine question. Yeah, probably. They probably do force vaccinations for COVID. That'd be my guess. Don't they make you take flu shots if you're in the military? Bro, you get so many vaccines in the military, or at least my parents told me you used to. I'm reading that mRNA vaccines are far less invasive than traditional vaccines as there is no live virus and the scary spike protein is just some shitty coating that the immune system eats up. No, I wouldn't call it less invasive. You're still getting something vaccinated into you. And there are still potentials for it to go very wrong. Like any vaccine can have a multitude of issues that occur for really complicated reasons from what does ADE stand for? Adaptive diplomatic embolism. I'm just making shit up. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a lot of vaccines. It's where you have a maladaptive immune response that actually blocks your cells from being able to kill a virus, but it doesn't actually weaken the virus. ADE, what did that stand for? I did so much fucking vaccine bullshit ass research. Antibody dependent enhancement. There's a lot of random things that could go wrong in vaccinating somebody. Or some people were saying that the nanolipid particles, or that the spike proteins that your cells produce could end up in your heart and cause inflammation. That was where the myocarditis comes from. Like, yeah, you would never say that it's not invasive. A vaccine is almost always going to be invasive, but you should have pushed him more on the forced vaccine narrative. It was extremely warranted given the number of deaths. You should have asked him when it can be enforced, if ever. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole argument. I'm trying so hard not to ask questions and to be a little bit more narrow here because our conversation has like expanded or spanned so many topics. Yeah. There was no justification to mandate them if they didn't stop transmission. They did. They slowed transmission by decreasing the likelihood of you getting affected or infected. That's a reduction in transmission. If you're not getting infected, then there's a less likelihood of you transmitting because you aren't infected.
Is psychopathy something that can be environmentally induced, or do you think this is core to a person?
It's both. So,
Okay.
for example, if you're disagreeable, like you are, by the way, your proclivity, if you went wrong, would be to go wrong in an antisocial and psychopathic direction. And that's more true of men, for example, than it is for women. That's why men are more likely to be in prison by a lot. I think it's 10 to 1 or 20 to 1 generally. It depends on the particular crime, with it being higher proportion of men as the violence of the crime mounts. So you can imagine on the genetic versus environment side. So imagine that when you're delivered your temperamental...
Why laugh? It's true that it's both, because like everything is everything, and I feel like it's hard to like actually have a single line of thought or a single, like following a single train of thought, because every single question has every single answer. Like, do you think that climate change has to be done by evil people, or could like good people do it? Well, I think it could be both. Okay, well, like for the people that are trying their best, do you think that they have society's benefit in mind, or do you think they're like selfishly driven? Well, it could be either. Okay, do you think that like when you say like selfishly driven, I mean like do you mean like they're just like, is it selfish for their, I guess, psychological feel good, or like, so well, it could be a variety of things. It's just like every answer has every answer, every question has every answer, and every answer has every answer, and everything is just like not really trying to defend him on this, but is it not true that every issue has good people and bad people? Like, it's reductive to the point of useless, but isn't it right? No, but it doesn't. If you're making strong claims, if you're making strong statements about like climate change is done by malevolent evil actors, okay, well then let's figure out what we mean when we say that. Then you can't, when pushed on anything, you can't become reductive to the point of absurdity or pointlessness in that everything bleeds into everything. Because you're making strong claims initially. Well, if you're making strong claims, we need to find the foundation of those strong claims, what you believe, and then look at the justifications for those beliefs to see if we believe that it's deductively true, does it logically follow, or if the premises are true. Like, oh, are your actual statements, your initial statements that you're building this argument off of true? But if you make strong statements, then when you try to explore those strong statements, every single thing bleeds into everything else. Everything is violence. Everything is force. Everybody is good and evil. Everything is environmental and genetic. Then it's like, okay, well, I don't know what the fuck the foundation for any of your beliefs actually are.
I would argue even the majority of malevolence in the world is usually people acting selfishly or being...
Isn't it better to explain to Peterson why you say the things you believe instead of explaining here in chat why you said? Well, I'm trying to, I don't even know what he's saying. When I'm asking clarifying questions, it's because I'm trying to figure out like, what do you actually believe, or what is the claim that you're making? It's just, that's why I'm asking clarifying questions. I don't even know what the fuck is being stated at any of these points. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Do you think that society ever exists without...
Use force on your wife?
Well, what are we considering force? Is withholding sex, for instance, is that considered force? Or is, saying we're going to cancel a vacation?
Deprivation of an expected reward is a punishment. So you
sure.
could... Well, no, but I mean, this is a serious question. I mean,
Yeah.
look, if we're thinking about the optimization of social structures, we might as well start from the base level of social structure and scaffold up.
Sure. So
Right.
it's like if a wife is upset at a husband, for instance, would that be considered use of force? I think a negative punishment. You're removing a stimulus to punish a person for something. Yeah, would you consider that like a use of force? Or
I would say it would depend to some degree on the intent.
the intent is to punish a...
Well, if
Like, oh, bro, I feel like I can't do anything. What?
I would say it would depend to some degree on the intent.
The intent is to reduce the behavior. That's why it's called a punishment, right? Positive or negative refers to adding or removing a stimulus. Punishment or reward refers to whether you're trying to discourage or encourage behavior. So a negative punishment is removing a stimulus in order to negative punishment is removing a stimulus to punish a behavior, right? To decrease a behavior. Why are we even asking this question at the end here? I feel like it's an endless string of reductive questions until I don't even know what the fuck we're talking about.
Punish it.
Well, if the intent is to punish, then it's starting to move into the domain of force.
The lesson here is that Destiny should not have oversimplified how force was used to inject people with experimental technology. Wow, retard alert. JP is right to make Destiny engage in nuance to prove his position. There is no nuance here, you retarded fuck. You understand that, like, if we're using this definition of force, you are literally forced to do everything always at all points in time if you live in a state. Right? You're forced to do everything. You're forced to wear clothes by threat of by murder, by the way. If you don't wear clothes, you will be murdered, right? Because if we follow that deductive chain of logic, well, what happens? You go outside with no clothes on, somebody's gonna call the police on you. Police show up and they're gonna say, hey, you're breaking the law, you need to go inside or do something. You say no, they're gonna arrest you. You try to resist arrest because you think you have autonomy, they're eventually gonna shoot and kill you, right? Like, I mean, like every single thing is at the end of the day met with force in any state that you live in that has a violent means of enforcing, ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever a police officer or the law tells you to do. That's so reductively stupid and boring, though. What a boring fucking statement. You're not saying anything of value at that point. Like, hey, I just had a really cool revelation today. Yeah, what's your revelation? You know, if you really think about it, the government would kill me if I spoke too loud. What do you mean the government would kill you if you spoke too loud? Well, if I was too loud, and my neighbors reported me for loud noise, and then the building tried to evict me, and I said I didn't want to leave, and then police officers showed up, and they said that I don't have the right to be here, and then I resisted them trying to get out, and then they fought me, and I fought back, and I had a gun to defend myself, and they shot and killed me. In a way, you're like, it's such a boring non-statement. This is the actual philosophical masturbation that people talk about, or the academic masturbation people talk about when they say, like, lay Reddit Fedora tipper. It's when you've reduced everything to such an absurd level that you can literally make any statement to mean anything at any point in time, and you're not saying anything insightful anymore. You're just like, well, everything is. This is like when you get high, you know, like everything at the end of the day, bro, is about sex. It's about who fucks who. And I was like, what do you mean by that? Well, think about it. If all men or all women said they wouldn't fuck you if you didn't do a thing, and then your bloodline died, and then your genes disappeared, like at the end of the day, isn't everything in the whole world really about fucking people? And then in a way, like, it's just like, okay, it's not, what am I supposed to engage with here? Like, LOL, Destiny tried to make light of the mechanism that the government used to turn society upside down, and JP wouldn't let him just pass it off as simple as everything has force. Nobody forced you to get vaccinated. You would just have to get tested every week. Like, if you're gonna say that that's force, and I agree that it's a type of force, but you have to be aware that when you say force, that's not what most people are thinking of. It's also, it's a non-central. Wait, didn't I write this down in one of my sneaky fallacious tricks? What do we call this one? I need a name for this. Is it non-central fallacy or... No, debate pervertry. Oh, I need to write this one down in particular. When you make an accusation about something, I think Scott Adams wrote on this, didn't he? He called it the non-central fallacy. He just made that name up. But it's like when you say something and it's like, oh, yesterday I was forced to do this thing. And when you say force, it invokes, or yesterday I actually hung out with 3 criminals, right? And you're like, oh shit, criminals. Like, damn. When you say criminal, that brings a certain thing to mind. And then you're like, yeah, all 3 of them had unpaid parking tickets. You're like, oh, well, that's not really. And it's like, what? You're going to tell me that's not a crime now? It literally is. Hello, criminal code, state statute. This is actually criminal behavior. They actually have warrants out for their arrest. They've got bench warrants because they were summoned to court. So they are criminal. It's like, okay, yeah, but that's not really what we're talking about, right? Much the same way when you talk about government forcing you to do a particular thing, it's important to be precise. And what do we mean when we say force, right? Because if Jordan Peterson has broadened this to encompass every single potential thing that a government could or couldn't do for you, every positive and negative thing is now being, every positive freedom and every negative freedom is now being implied here. It's like, okay. In that case, fine. Then every single thing that's happening in society is done at force. But if everything is a thing, then nothing is a thing. It's not doing anything anymore. The whole point of words and ideas is to draw circles and boundaries around things so that we can discuss them and compare them and contrast them.
Cases where
people literally did get fired. Are you kidding me? If they did, that was up to their private place of employment to determine, which as a conservative, you should fully be supporting. If someone wants to fire you for not getting vaccinated, that's on the place of employment. I'm pretty sure you have the right to do that, don't you? Destiny, the issue is that we are making medication part of the thing we enforce. That's already happened. There's already mandatory vaccines in society if you want to be part of the military, if you want to go to public schools. There's already a thing. What do you mean?
you don't really rehabilitate people in prison.
What is he saying? This is fucking nonsense? I think it's pretty true. I think people have don't men have huge crime committing years, and when they're outside of those years, they tend not to commit anywhere near as much crime? I'm pretty sure that's true. I'm not even listening. I'm just reading, trying to get it triggered. Isn't it like 15 to 24 or some shit? There's some age block where if you, it's just the age blocks where men are so much more likely to commit crime. And when you throw them in jail and then you lock them up until they're out of those crime committing years, generally it falls off dramatically. I don't think that's even controversial.
Prison for obvious reasons. I mean, look at the bloody places. They're great schools for crime in large, but if you keep them there until they're old enough, they tend to mature.
Wouldn't you make a distinction between going to school and going into the military in terms of what the average individual absolutely needs? I would say there's a meaningful difference. I'm saying that the requirement's the same. I'm saying that there are places where bro, I can't believe we have to debate vaccines. Please let the next one be worse. Where's the next pandemic? Force and the monopoly on violence is a literal prerequisite for the state and government, but JBP is bringing it up as if it's up for debate among anyone who isn't an anarchist, socialist. Yeah, that's what I said before. Any state you live in, there has to be some violent mechanism of enforcement. Otherwise, people will just do whatever the fuck. Just because someone transmits and is more infectious is not cause for panic. I think it is totally reasonable for citizens to cry foul when the government tries to make you seem like a leper on society for not taking vaccines for something akin to a flu/cold. Flus are serious deals, especially to people that are immunocompromised, my dude. And you should feel like a piece of shit because you are a selfish piece of shit. And you should get bullied for it. And people should make you feel like a shitty person for it too. If you don't want to get vaccinated because you're on some fucking hype, retarded fuck conspiracy nonsense. People should bully the fuck out of you. And you should feel bad for it eventually. Just like all social mechanisms, whether you want to fuck kids or whether you want to be a bioweapon and transmit diseases to people because you're too much of a fucking retard to take a shot. Yeah, people should make everybody feel fucking bad for it. I think a cultural mechanism there is totally acceptable. And something transmitting a lot is a big deal because even if they're not dying, if a bunch of people are getting sick and clogging up fucking hospitals, then yeah, that is a deal. It's a big deal. It's an issue. You don't want that happening. Taking the vaccine doesn't even help the people around you. The vaccine was proven to not stop transmission. If you don't get sick, you have nothing to transmit. So if you get vaccinated and then as a result of that, you don't get sick, then you're not transmitting. What the fuck? How is it so hard to understand? That typically you're immune for the rest of your life after infection. That is, wait, I'm sorry, hold on. For measles or for diseases in general? For measles, that might be true. I don't remember. I think that might be true for measles. Do you get measles multiple times? I'm not sure if that's true or not. A person can spread measles for 4 days. No infection. It makes a person immune for the rest of their life. That means, okay, so measles is generally a permanent immunity afterwards. I'm pretty sure the CDC confirmed asymptomatic transmission with COVID. You can transfer asymptomatically, but if you never really develop COVID at all because you're vaccinated, which means you have a much higher chance of, well, for the early infections, I don't know for Omicron, I don't know what the protection is now. It might be down to 40, 50%, I'm not sure. For the early ones, if the SARS-CoV-2 virus enters your body and barely replicates before being eliminated and destroyed by your immune system because you've been vaccinated, then your likelihood of transmitting is way, 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 way lower because you're not sick. You're not even creating as much of the virus. Asymptomatic spread is just not a thing for Destiny. Asymptomatic means that you have a disease, but you're not presenting symptoms. Asymptomatic doesn't mean a-diseased. It doesn't mean no disease at all. It means that you're not developing the symptoms. That's why it's called asymptomatic. What do you think the symptom part means, or what do you think the A before it means? How many jabs will you take if they keep telling you? How about a healthy sense of skepticism? I like how you're so fucking retarded that you'll sit here and get diseased over and over and over again. You're like, you're so retarded for getting vaccinated as you have COVID for the 17th time. Like, please. Oh my God. Eat shit. Literal.
The tit for tat is very bounded, right? It's like...
When you say tit for tat, are you referring to that Veritasium video about game theory? No, I got this from Robert Sapolsky and his talk about, is it evolutionary biology? That tit for tat systems are basically how species ensure good behavior with each other because there's always a punishment and there's some level of charitability beforehand. Like tit for tat or tit for tat tat or whatever. There's like these different tit for tat systems so that you enforce social behavior because if you f up, somebody's going to keep you in line. Never had COVID, never had the jab. People who got the jab 15 times have gotten COVID. Womp womp Destiny. Yeah, that you're not bragging, my dude. The fact that you're a 33-year-old, 250-pound fucking virgin dying of type 2 diabetes in his parents' basement is not something to brag about. Like, congratulations, you've never got a particular disease before? What do you think that your body is like super immune to it because you didn't get vaccinated? Like, what kind of retarded argument is that? Holy shit. Like, if your body is so strong, you should get the ass by a dude with AIDS 30 times and see if you resisted then. See how like disease resistant you actually are. My God. What if I just don't want it? I ain't hating on the vaccine, I just don't want it. Then base, dude. At least just be honest about it. Say I don't want to get that shit. Then fine, base. You just want to win the discussion at Destiny. When you realize you're not winning, you say the other person is stuck in their ways, not realizing that you are just as stuck. I've always said this a million times. If you show me the data, I will change my mind. I've done that. I've changed my mind on big issues in the past. I've changed my mind on small issues in the past. You will never change your mind. There is no piece of data. Adult content enjoyer. What data would you need to start taking mRNA vaccines? Tell us in chat. What would you need to see? Like a reasonable standard that would also be approved for every other type of medication. What would you need to see? Explain why they changed the definition of vaccine. That change had to do with like the way that a line was written in some like insurance or FDA classification bullshit or whatever. It had nothing to do with the actual idea of what a vaccine is. Like, again, like I said, you guys wouldn't accept attenuated virus vaccines. If those were created today, you wouldn't accept it. You would say, that's not a vaccine. That doesn't count. What do you think a vaccine is? If I were to ask you, what is a vaccine? You have no idea. You can give a coherent answer. You probably don't understand any of the underlying technologies at work here, especially the mRNA one. Like, so what do you mean? Why do they change the definition of vaccine? Like, there's tons of different technologies that have been employed for different types of vaccines. Whether or not the FDA had to change the way that they labeled a particular thing is not relevant to the scientific understanding of what a vaccine is or what it does. Have long-term side effects ever been recorded from a vaccine ever? I'm not aware of that. When I did research on side effects for vaccines, I think what I saw was, 2 months is the longest recorded date for vaccine side effects. I came across that a few times. I've never heard of any other vaccine producing like long-term side effects, like longer than 2 months. I haven't seen that anywhere. Somebody wants to link one, go for it. But okay.